all come. I have seen in people's homes everything comes.
Please, everyone, no greetings in the chat box. Leave it for questions and answers. Please, that's an earnest request. No greetings, no good evening, please. No hi, ma'am.
Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to day one of the Global Tipping Point Summit 2022. The Global Tipping Point Summit is an idea and a dream lovingly nurtured and molded by its founder director, Dr. Kumi S. Bivina. Do allow me to give you a glimpse of the mind that shaped this summit. Dr. Kumi S. Vivina, professor and former head Department of English, University of Mumbai, wears many hats with ease and aplomb. She is an education futurist. She is the founder director of the annual Global Tipping Point Summit, as already mentioned, a peace activist, an internationally acclaimed educator, literary critic, teacher, educator, writer, and storyteller. Kumi has 2 PhD degrees to her credit, one in literature and the other in education, both of which are rooted in psychology. She has published 11 books and 58 papers that have appeared in peer-reviewed national and international journals and critical anthologies. She has won numerous national and international awards and is a renowned speaker who delivers lectures and leads seminars and workshops for teachers and parents. The 2 TEDx talks which she delivered have received rave reviews from viewers. The The International Journal of Canadian Studies, Ottawa, declared her as among the 10 best Canadian critics in the world, and this won her an honorary position for 3 years on the advisory board of the International Journal for Canadian Studies. She was reappointed on the board from fall 2007 to 2009. The Sahitya Akademi nominated her as a member on the English Advisory Board from April 2016 to December 2017. Kumi is passionate about teaching pedagogy and has been actively involved in curriculum designing at all levels and has helped set up study centers in India and abroad. In 2013, her book on education, Sourceful Intelligence, Understanding Uniqueness and Oneness Through Education, was selected as among the 18 best books published in the USA. In 2013, her most recent book, What Children Really Want, has received critical acclaim from educators, psychologists, parents, writers from all over the world, and even the Dalai Lama. In August-September 2015, she was selected by the World Leaders in Education, that's WLE, as one of the 35 women from across the world changing educational paradigms. In 2020-21, she directed the online International Global Tipping Point Summit that was attended by 6,332 participants from India and abroad. Currently, she is engaged in creating the Pegc, that is, Personalized Education for Global Citizenship Framework, in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations and UNESCO's 4 Pillars of Learning. Kumi has her own storytelling organization called Wordfully Yours, which hosts storytelling programs and conducts training workshops on storytelling for enhancing eco-literacy, socio-literacy, and psycho-literacy. Kumi adores children, loves reading, music, dancing, experiences deep oneness with nature, and tries to do all she can to make our rapidly shrinking and increasingly threatened world a better place for generations to come. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am, and may I request you to give us an overview of the summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nina Nair. Dr. Nina Nair supports us at every activity of the GTPS and Wordfully Yours, which is our storytelling organization. So welcome everyone here. And I'm here to just talk very, very briefly about the Global Tipping Point Summit and how it differs from the usual conferences and workshops. So once again, welcome to GTPS, the Global Tipping Point Summit. At the outset, I would like to say that I need to thank my entire committee. I have an education committee, an academic committee, and an advisory board, which advises me and really gives me amazing ideas to take my work forward. So I would like to acknowledge that. I would like to first, could we have the picture of Dr. Firoza Godrej, please? Right at the beginning of the presentation. So I would like to read out, right at the beginning of the presentation, we have Dr. Firoza Godrej. So if we could run to that, please. At the beginning, this is the end. So I'll start. Dr. Firoza Godrej has been one of my first supporters. When I went to her with this concept of GTPS, she embraced it. She said she loved it. And she really wanted to promote it. Today, unfortunately, she has not been able to attend, but she has asked me to read out her message. Dr. Godrej says, while realizing the need for me to attend this most important summit, as I'm unable to do so due to personal commitments, I feel strongly about sending a message. I am happy that the Global Tipping Point Summit has organized a well-structured 4-day summit with star-studded speakers and interesting topics from 19th February 2022 onwards. Long-term unemployment is creating a new underclass amongst nations. While developing countries lack a social security system for the unemployed, leading to considerable misery, this is not the norm in the developed world. The pandemic has leveled all societies by striking at the very heart of commerce. Swami Vivekananda's words are relevant. The only service to be done for our lower classes is to give them education to develop their lost individuality. Our country is one of the most highly industrialized countries and has made highly significant strides on advanced technology. It is beyond comprehension, therefore, how we have failed in tackling so basic a problem as population education nexus. There is hope, therefore, that we can still develop the right mental attitudes and implement the right educational priorities. In the words of the Sufi poet, seldom did I miss an opportunity to gain knowledge. There remained a few mysteries that I did not comprehend. Yet, at the age of 70 years and 12, it is clear to me that nothing has been clear to me. How, for instance, out of India's population of 1.38 billion, 138 crores, 287 million are illiterate. I'm delighted that the Global Tipping Point Summit has started a global movement in addressing educational needs. I take this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Kumi Vevaina and other organizing colleagues of the Global Tipping Point for the tremendous effort put in by them to organize this innovative and enterprising program, which will no doubt be a great success. I wish the Global Tipping Point Summit all success in its noble endeavors. The other message is a brief message from Mr. Naushad Dadrawala, who is also an esteemed member on our advisory board. Mr. Dadrawala says, critics often refer to conferences and summits as talk shops or forums to meet and greet, or simply to see and be seen. The Global Tipping Point Summit 2022, fortunately, is a league apart. What has been conceived and envisaged is a classic example of walk the talk with action plans in terms of projects that will be planned and actioned soon after the summit with clear goals and objectives. I congratulate Dr. Kumi Vevaina and her team for their meticulous hard work in curating this unique summit, and I wish them all success. So with that, we will move on. As I said earlier, besides Dr. Firoza Godrej and Mr. Dadrawala, Mr. Yazdi Tantra, Mr. Sanjay Rastogi, Dr. Shehnaz Kama, Ms. Deepa Soman, Mr. Milind Soman, Mr. Nitin Orion, and Ms. Anita Subedar are the members on our advisory committee. Our academic committee comprises Ms. Harinder Shroff, Ms. Beena Parekh, Ms. Mahalakshmi Anand, Principal Debika Chatterjee, Dr. Bindu Chowdhury, Ms. Mahera Goyal, Ms. Jalpa Vithalani, Ms. Preeti Takle, Ms. Ruchita Darsha, and Ms. Abhilasha Ketan. So a big thank you to this wonderful team of people who believe in our vision and work with us shoulder to shoulder. So just a few questions that I wish to address here. Why is this summit important? With 258 million children and youth out of school, as the latest UNESCO reports tell us, we really feel that something in our education system is not working for today's children. And we do need to rethink our educational system. Of course, stalwarts like Jiddu Krishnamurti often said that the minute you use the word system, you bring in the concept of rigidity. So we are trying to change this system into learning ecosystems. Today, we realize that even the primary school dropout rate has increased exponentially in India as well as in the rest of the world. To add to it, there is an increase in mental health issues and even suicide among young people, often due to the bane of what Sir Ken Robinson called standardized testing, the bane of standardized testing. One size fits all, the cookie cutter approach. That does not seem to be working for the youth today. Next, please. So in that sense, the summit is trying to do something really important. The Global Tipping Point Summit of 2020 and 2021 had this framework. We had the speaker marked in red at the center speak for 20 minutes. The speaker laced with 4 people marked in blue in the diagram who worked with the speaker for about about 4 months before the event. And they came up with a project. At the Global Tipping Point Online Summit, after the speaker spoke for 20 minutes, each of the change facilitators spoke for 5 minutes each. And they announced to the audience the area in which they would be providing training. We did not expect many people to sign up because it is an age of digital fatigue. But to our astonishment, 354 people signed up for free online training. They received it, and they are the action group members marked in green in the diagram. The training modules were 3 hours. Each facilitator trained them for 3 hours. That is a total of 12 hours. Some took 3 months, some took longer, but then the action group members had gone ahead to disseminate the knowledge that they had gained. So this was the very simple structure of GTPS 2021. And what was very, very encouraging to all of us was that we received tremendous support from none other than His Holiness the Dalai Lama. One day before our summit began, he sent this letter, almost a personal letter, congratulating the Global Tipping Point Summit for the work that it's doing and saying that it's completely aligned with his vision. We also had Sadhguru writing to us and saying how he is also completely aligned with the kind of work that we are doing. We had army generals like Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, one of the most well-known of psychiatrists in India, Mr. Kersi Chowda. We had Shamak Dava, the choreographer, singer, performer, entertainer, director. Shri M, who is an educationist as well as a spiritual guide and a Padma Bhushan awardee. And we had media people like Cyrus Brocha, Baman Irani, and Rageshwari Lumba. So supported by all these people, and with 22 eminent speakers from India and abroad, talking on education and parenting, we were fortunate to have 11 out of the 16 projects take off. Initially, we thought that perhaps 4 or 5 would take off, but GTPS 1 has been quite a success story. We had 6,332 participants because we had 19 sessions. This time's Global Tipping Point has a different structure, but there we had 1 session per speaker and change facilitator group. And we had 72 educational institutions as partner institutions. We are not into number games, but this was an amazing response, which thrilled all of us. Now, GTPS 22, which begins from now, will focus on creating a new educational framework, which we call the Pegc, Personalized Education for Global Citizenship. I just want to dwell a little longer on this. Education should be personalized, and at the same time, personalized to the individual intelligences and interests of the child, but at the same time, it should also focus on making our students, our learners, into global citizens. So global Pegc. Now, the Pegc framework is designed to be a joy-filled, consciousness-changing framework aligned to the natural rhythms of each of the learners. We'll try that. The aim is to nurture 21st century skills, and I'm not going to list those skills because we have a wonderful session on that by Dr. Krishnaswami today itself. So, nurturing 21st century skills by rooting the framework in the social development goals of the United Nations, UNESCO's Pillars of Learning, and our very own NEP, the National Education Policy of India. We have a constellation of over 50 eminent educationists as speakers and chairpersons. Importantly, we do not call them moderators because they are experts in their own area and will have something to contribute to the discussion. The areas that will be focused on is rethinking our approach to education, 21st century skills for leaders, necessary changes in assessment, teaching in active sensorial ways through nature, the arts, sports, and games, creating genuinely inclusive classrooms, ways of helping children with social, emotional, and ethical learning, SEL, nurturing civic sense and service orientation in young learners, and the importance of reading. The Pegc framework uses this consciousness changing process called technopoiesis. And I will not dwell on that as well right now, but those of you who are there on the 27th, when I do my presentation, will get to know more about technopoiesis. We plan to work on the framework in 5 phases. Phase 1 is creating a new educational framework with sample lesson plans under the guidance of experts. We are not creating a curriculum. We are creating a framework which goes across curriculum. Phase 2, we'll be training teachers for pilot testing the new framework. Phase 3, pilot testing the framework in 50 schools. Phase 4, modifying the framework based on the feedback received from teachers, parents, and learners while pilot testing. And phase 5, finalizing the framework after presenting it for further scrutiny and refinement at the Global Tipping Point Summit in 2023, next year. So with this, I once again thank everyone for being here. I'm so touched by the fact that so many people are interested in change. And I want to end this presentation today with a quote from one of my favorite writers. Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But he who sees takes off his shoes. The others sit around and pluck berries. So we can all get together, work towards reaching the tipping point, and then change must and will happen. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nina, again.
Thank you, ma'am. We now move on to our first session, and it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Donna Reen. Ms. Reen is a visiting faculty at the University of Mumbai and a DGCA certified trainer and examiner for the Airport Authority of India for English language and communication. I welcome Ms. Reen and request her to take over the session. Thank you.
Our first speaker for today is none other than Ms. Carolyn Shaw. She will be talking on today's children, tomorrow's adults, rethinking our approach to education. A little about Ms. Carolyn Shaw. She is a retired headmistress and teacher of English literature. Carolyn lives in West Sussex, UK with her husband. They are both actively involved with the village community, as well as share an interest in their beautiful garden, which overlooks the water meadows of the River Arun and up to the Sound Downs. While her husband is an academic with a worldwide knowledge and experience of the quality of healthcare, Carolyn's interests lie in the arts and education. They have 2 grown-up children who give her much pleasure and pride. She has taught in a variety of secondary schools, both independent and state, and in the American High School in Bermuda. After 7 years at Cheltenham Ladies College, she became headmistress of St. Mary's School, Caen, for another 7 years. She was then appointed headmistress of Rodine School in Brighton until she retired. During those years, she served on the committee of the Girls' School Association and on the Independent Schools Examination Board. After retirement, she took on the role of chairman of governors of her local village school for several years. All her experience as teacher and mother underlies her belief in the importance of giving children the knowledge and confidence to develop a thoughtful voice of their own. Parents, teachers, and governors must ensure that all children are encouraged to develop the skills they will need to negotiate the challenges of our complicated world. So over to you, Ms. Carolyn Shaw.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Carolyn, we can.
Hello, everybody. I am very honoured to have been invited to talk to you today as part of this inspirational project. The effective education of our children is, without doubt, our greatest responsibility as adults. And I'm really thrilled to have been able to contribute a small way to this debate. We don't know what the world is going to be like when today's small children are adults. We're talking 20, 30, 40, 50 years on, so we can't possibly know. But what we do know is that they will have to be resilient. They'll have to make decisions. They need to be able to cope creatively with disappointments or failure, as another way of putting it, and to rise to challenges. And I'm very much aware that we're all working in very different contexts. And those contexts, of course, also influence what we can do, how we can do it. Every child lives within the influence of several cultures: family, local community, religious affiliation, local government, national government, just to state a few. And all these have a direct bearing on the approach to and the demands of their education. We teachers add a further cultural framework in our school aims and school practice and within the classroom. And all those affect the way the children live, and they're all an essential component of who they are as individuals. And as teachers, we have to adapt our approach to work with all those conditions and, of course, to complement them. In my view, every single child in the whole world has the right to an education which opens doors to a world of exploration and discovery. And that has to be driven by kindness and a real desire on the part of adults to nurture and encourage those explorations. And that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to pose some questions today and offer one or two suggestions. And all this is coming from my own experience as a mother, a teacher, a headmistress, a school governor, and of course also as a citizen of the world. There will be 7 questions, and we'll have a look at some suggestions for those. There is no need to take notes because the whole, all the points will be available afterwards on the website. But do, of course, jot down your own ideas as we go. Now, I'm starting with 3 basic principles to guide our planning. Could we go back to the principles, please, the previous slide? Children are our future, and what happens to them influences the way our societies will develop in their lifetime. That seems very obvious to us, but not all governments appear to understand that basic principle of children being the future. Sensitively educated adults who are confident in their own abilities and strengths will be able to contribute to a thriving economy, which we all strive for, and a well-adjusted society. The second principle is that what we're doing must always be focused on what's best for the child. And that must be the driving force, the child and what is best for the child. Sometimes we could be forgiven for thinking that exam boards and league tables and national standing are the outcome of our education system. No, we need to ask ourselves, what do children need and how can we provide it? And the second principle, which is behind everything I'm thinking about, is that successful adults are not just the product of the grades they achieved at school or university. Society doesn't need millions of adults who can pass exams. Those so-called soft skills of teamwork, ability to lead, personal responsibility, awareness of others' needs, resilience in the face of setbacks, that's what makes people successful and makes society successful. Schools which celebrate those skills give their pupils an enormous advantage. I've had experience of pupils who've been disappointed by their exam results. And I've said to those pupils, but you have skills that some of those academic stars don't have. You'll be successful because you understand people. You understand the way the world works. And that's what we are looking for. That girl that I spoke to about that grew 2 or 3 inches in the time I spoke to her. Now, on to my next slide, please. I have 3 basic concepts which I apply in all my thinking about education. My favorite image is that of a kaleidoscope. That might surprise you, but in fact, I developed it very early on in my time as a headmistress. The slightest turn of a kaleidoscope produces a completely new pattern. And sometimes that's all we need, a tiny little turn to find another pattern that's even more beautiful than the last one. What we're embarking on today is a huge task. It's monumental enough to make us think, goodness, how can we do that? Well, we can't do it by tomorrow or next week or next term, maybe, but we can start now. And the accumulation of tiny steps, tiny turns of the kaleidoscope will soon bring about a much bigger change. So I would say as teachers, let's constantly turn that kaleidoscope and look for new opportunities to help children creatively. The second concept I learned actually as a result of being the mother of a very naughty boy whose school had the most wonderful philosophy of a kind of straight and wide approach to education, not straight and narrow, which is that age-old philosophy. Very, very firm guidelines, but quite a bit of flexibility in the middle. But those straight guidelines, absolutely firm, so that children who are natural rule breakers, as my son was and still is as a creative adult, they know where that line cannot be changed and they learn confidence from that. But let's be a little bit more flexible in what goes on between those lines. Often a raised eyebrow will turn a child back onto the right path. And finally, this is something I only learned as a teacher after I had children of my own. Every child is somebody's son or daughter, and we must treat all children as though they were our own and do for them what we would want done for our own children. Now, on to the first question. What does society need in tomorrow's adults? Well, right at the start, I said we need to equip them to be resilient, to be able to make decisions, cope creatively with disappointment, and rise to challenges. They can't suddenly do that the minute they leave school or become an adult. They have to learn as they go. And those qualities are so important for all adults, and I would say for all children as well. They have to develop the ability to judge confidently between what's right and what's wrong. And I think that is becoming even more important now. I can't speak for India, but here in the UK, the lines between right and wrong are becoming increasingly blurred. And the future of our society in our children needs to ensure that that is never lost. We have to be able to make sound judgments about what is right and wrong. We won't always agree. The line isn't necessarily a rigid one, but it's very important that children learn that. And alongside that, they have to understand the importance of honesty and integrity. And again, it's under question in our society, particularly here, and I imagine in other countries as well. It is so important, such an important part of the culture in which children grow up. And another one that I think we're losing too is to understand that responsibility and personal freedom go hand in hand. You cannot have personal freedom unless you take responsibility as well. I used to say to my own children, you have every right to waste your time if that's what you want to do. I don't advise it, but it's your right. But you have no right at all to waste mine or anybody else's, not another child's, nor any other person. And we have to teach and show by example that if you have rights within society, you also have responsibilities to live, to acknowledge and live by the law of the land, not to inflict harm on other people or their possessions. These are really interesting discussions to have with children because they find it fascinating. Children are very, very keen until they have it quashed to understand how the world works, how it works for them, how what they do leads them into good places, not naughty steps. We need them in a straight and wide approach to test the boundaries and find securely where they are and to learn from the kind response of adults what they can do and what isn't acceptable. Having too many narrow and important rules so that children are always in trouble, you know, particularly those who are inclined that way, it isn't helpful to them. Let's focus on the really, really important things, be strict about those and kind, and maybe they're to do with safety and respect for others. But let's establish a clear structure in that way. I believe that children are happier when they hear the word no sometimes, and they understand what it means. A little story about my own son, as I've already said, was on the naughty side. When he was about 3 and you'd ask him a question, you would say, would you like an ice cream? He would reply, I would. Have you had a nice day? I have. And we suddenly realized we had said no to him so many times that he'd never heard the word yes. And we have to avoid that. They have to learn yes as well as no. They have to have the courage to assess risk. Oh my goodness, do we live in a society that wants to protect children from absolutely everything? Life's an adventure, and it starts the moment you're born. Let's teach our children to judge for themselves whether an action is a good idea. And if they get it wrong, let's explore with them what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how we can avoid that. Failure is part of life, but children need to be shown how to develop that, how to take risks, how to both physically and intellectually. Let them explore ideas and allow them a kind framework in which to get it wrong, because it's only when we get it wrong that things begin to work out again. Let them not be afraid of making guesses and thus learning more creatively. We need them to solve their problems creatively. Just recently, a colleague of mine who manages the website of a charity which I chair said to me, this is a really tricky problem. I'm going to have to work hard to solve this, but don't I just love having a problem? That's the attitude we want in our children. Let them enjoy the problems, because there's a challenge and problems can always be solved in some way. And we need them also to be independent whilst also understanding their role in the wider society. No man is an island, to quote John Donne, and to value all people and our interconnected roles. All of society is linked. All children, all adults are part of teams which interlock and coexist. No team is more important than any other. We all are part of a balance, and let's let the children understand that sometimes one team is more important, another time another team is more important, but they are all important in a balance to keep us working together. The next question, please, the next slide. Well, what are schools for? Here's a great question. Well, I've got just 6 suggestions to make, and I know that you will think of lots more, but time is short. First and foremost, schools are there to nurture, and if necessary, if children haven't had that chance before they come to school, to awaken children's curiosity. We have to ensure that all children learn to read and to write and to understand numbers. Without those basic skills, their lives are going to be impoverished. And that's really one of the most important things we have to do, particularly in these early years. We have to introduce children to areas of knowledge and to show them how to explore ideas. We have to, in the schools, explore the children's interests, develop them, watch for their talents, develop their skills, foster ambition. If a child says, I want to be an astronaut, don't just smile in a patronizing adult way. Let's say, well, how are you going to do that? If you want to change the climate, how are we going to do it? What are you going to do to be able to do that? Let's foster innovation and courageous thinking. And let's ensure through all that intellectual exploration and nurturing of skills and so on, let's make sure that children are acquiring the qualities that we've already talked about, that they need to be successful adults. That's about the culture of the school. And that's going to be, I think, one of the most important areas of exploration as we embark on this work. How to establish in the massive variety of schools that we have that approach that allows each child to develop that curiosity, that confidence in their own skills and talents. It's a huge task, but again, apply the kaleidoscope, do it tiny little steps, and I'm sure the end result will very quickly become apparent. Well, the next question, next slide, please. What are teachers for? Another very, very big question. And again, just half a dozen points to make just as a start. There is no doubt that well-trained and enthusiastic teachers are at the heart of everything to do with education. They're at the heart of every classroom, of every school, of every child's life. And they are at the heart of our society. Sometimes you wonder whether governments really understand the importance of the teacher's role and how powerful teachers are. We know that. We know that without our work, there will be no future society. It is that important. But the lot of a teacher is not an easy one. Over the last few decades, the respect for teaching as a profession has been undermined, even ridiculed sometimes. Successful teachers, and there are thousands of them, successful teachers earn the respect of their children, of the parents, of the school managers, of the school governors, and of society as a whole. And once they've earned their respect, they gain that respect from everyone. That's not easy, is it? We know that. But as teachers now, or as those involved with education now, we need to do everything we can so that society begins to appreciate the importance of our work and that the standing of teaching as a profession is raised. The only way we can do that is through our own actions. And sometimes it's hard because we're working with considerable opposition. Teachers also, as well as delivering the agreed curriculum of a school, look at each child as an individual. We have to do that. And we have to learn to understand each child's strengths and weaknesses. When teachers are weighed down by tick box exercises of so-called assessment of teachers, with ploughing through a rigid curriculum which doesn't leave any room for breath or creation, or red herrings, which are so important to a good teacher. A child asks a question which appears to be a red herring, but you know this is the day that the children will listen to the answers to that question. The curriculum isn't an end in itself. It's a means to offering children access to knowledge. We need to inculcate in children the desire to find the answers to questions in all kinds of ways, not just going to Google. Google isn't the only source. People are sources, books are sources, experiences are sources, discussion is a source. Let's do that. Teachers, of course, have to establish a classroom climate which is kind and welcoming and imbues all children with the confidence to extend themselves. We don't want children to be afraid going into a classroom that they haven't done the right thing, afraid because they had a bad time in their family last night and they haven't done their homework. They mustn't be afraid of that. We've got to allow children to relish success and also to understand that failure or disappointment are part of that creative force. And we've got to show them that learning and knowledgeable are enjoyable, they're fun, they're interesting. Not all children will be interested in everything, but let's find what does interest them. Teachers ask questions all the time, and the good teachers listen very carefully to their answers, responding appropriately and creating more opportunities for people to think. Very often we ask a question and we give the answer by asking another question. A classroom also has got to have those clear structures, the wide, straight structure, boundaries so that children know where they are, but the flexibility within them for children to try things out, to try experimenting, both in terms of their learning and their behavior. So obviously then, what about the curriculum? My next question. I would say the specific content of the curriculum is nowhere near as important as the way in which it's delivered. Enthusiasm and a creative approach light up children's learning. Ploughing through a rigid syllabus often doesn't. A highly prescriptive curriculum in fact, it is a danger to teachers' opportunities to inspire children if it's so rigid that teachers aren't able to use their own creative approach. It's not a good curriculum. A good curriculum has to be very wide. It's got to expose children to as many different disciplines as possible. The arts, science, languages, humanities, technology, more and more important. But never at the expense of art, sport, music, drama, and an exposure to the natural world, more and more important now in our dangerous climatic situation. And often these are the subjects which inspire the children who are less inclined to the more obvious academic disciplines. They thrive through painting or singing or playing an instrument or being on a stage. And technological advancement is here to stay. It is vital that we use the best aspects of technology. It's why we're able to be here today. I'm thousands of miles away from you, but I'm right there with you in the same room because of the technology. Children have to understand its use, its dangers, and its benefits. And what an advantage for teachers too in sharing. Another big question, how do we know that children are learning? Number 8. Well, this is the next slide, yes. $64,000 question, this one. Prescriptive standardized testing is in use all over the world. How reliable is it? It shows what children know on one day in one particular hour. Are we heading to a time when a computer decides how much a child knows? Well, 5 points here. The answer to this question is we have to trust teachers. Every teacher knows exactly where each child is on each day. They know which children are progressing and those which aren't. Sometimes they go backwards, and teachers know that. And they understand also that learning is not a steady upward climb. It fluctuates, it plateaus, and it happens in conjunction with what's going on in the rest of their lives. The other thing is, education isn't a race. It doesn't matter which child learns to read first or knows most words or completes the most sums in an arithmetic test. That doesn't matter. Each child has to learn at his or her own pace. It's the tortoise and the hare, isn't it? Slow and steady. Prescriptive testing, as I've already mentioned, has become a worldwide tool. And the purpose of it often seems to me to be more to catch what a child doesn't know than to celebrate what they do know. How useful is that, I ask? Can a percentage or a grade really tell you how well educated a person is? Now, the next question, so far, I haven't touched on parents. What about parents? Well, what I do know categorically, as both a parent and a teacher and a head, is that when parents and teachers trust and respect each other, the child's education benefits hugely. Every child is someone's son or daughter. And teachers do, I feel, have to see themselves in a creative partnership with parents. Teachers and parents see different aspects in their children. Well, we know that very well. And both teachers and parents have to listen to each other. It's rather like an argument. If I'm asked to arbitrate an argument, I have to say to each party, well, I wasn't there, you've told me this. I wasn't there, you've told me that. Somewhere in the middle lies the truth. And I think that's how we have to regard our relationship with parents, that we're working together on it. Teachers have to gain parents' trust and respect, and that's often these days very hard. Some parents think everything to do with their child's behavior and education is the school's responsibility, not theirs. Some parents aren't interested in education and they don't know its value. Some parents think they know more about education than teachers do because they themselves are a product of it. And I haven't found any answers to those problems other than patience, respect, and a school's scrupulous adherence to its policies. Difficulties with parents can arise because of things that go wrong, and we must always work together to put those things right. Parents often want to know, well, where is my child in the class? What is the grade? What percentage did she get in this test? And we need to find ways of discouraging this attitude by valuing each child for their accomplishments each day. Here's what your child has learned to do today. Here is what I've noticed she did today for the first time. Here is what I've noticed is big improvement. Suddenly he's understood how to do those sums, not where they stand in relation to the other children. And the final question, what can schools and teachers do to ensure that children develop all these skills? Well, I'm going to sum this up very briefly. Take a kaleidoscope approach. You can't change everything at once, and you can't make a lot of things happen quickly. But lots of small, wise, thoughtful changes consistently applied will soon lead to significant transformation, patience, and a kaleidoscope. School leaders and teachers need now to discuss and decide on the values they regard as essential. And it's important to involve parents in this as well, and the children too. What are the things that matter to us in this school to make it a happy place? And then, once we've got that, then the task is to consider how we can realize these values in the school as a whole and in the classroom. That way, we'll be on the way to creating a wonderful society for these children of the future, our next adults. Thank you. I believe there is going to be time for a few questions now, which I will do my best to answer. I'm not quite sure how they're going to come to me.
I will be asking you the questions. I've just got them down. Yes. Okay, that was a very interesting session, Carolyn, and you put in a lot of interesting points like kaleidoscope, straight and white, but there are a lot of questions that I have here. How do we, this is from the audience, Sunila, who says, how do we tackle religious beliefs which are becoming so dominant today that they develop otherness with peers of other cultures?
That's not an easy question to answer. I think at the heart of it is we have to agree that people's personal beliefs are important and they need to be respected. When I was head of Rodin, which is a very multinational school, we had a big debate amongst the staff on this very question. How do we manage all these different beliefs and enable us to live together as a happy community? And we started off by saying, well, first and foremost, we must tolerate the fact that people believe different things. And one of my often most difficult members of staff, the one who always asked a difficult question, said, well, I don't agree with you. I think tolerance is completely the wrong word here. Tolerance is patronizing. What we need is respect. And actually, thereafter, we never used tolerate at Rodin. We always used respect. I will respect your beliefs. I think the only way to deal with it when it becomes a dominant factor within a school or a classroom is to talk, to meet those people and say, can we talk about this? You know, these are the values of the school. There are other children as well, other families who have different beliefs. Can we find a way of working through this so that everybody feels comfortable? It's a very, very long task. It doesn't have a simple answer, but I hope that might be the beginnings of a process. Donna, you're muted. Donna, I didn't hear the question because you were muted.
Yes, I must. I hope that answers Sunila's question. And we'll go on to the next, that is in a system that is rigid and that is inflexible and rigid, and where it depends on students' needs. It's caught between the demands which are inflexible and student needs. Would you elaborate on the principles of kaleidoscope and the straight and wide?
Well, the kaleidoscope is just an image I used to myself. When I was ahead, I kept a very beautiful kaleidoscope in my study. And I used it when I had pupils who had been in trouble, who were in difficulty because they hadn't gone along with the firmest of our rules. And I used to spend an hour talking to them about what they'd done, not about them. I said, you were exactly the same person as you were before you did this. The only thing that's changed is you did this, which we don't approve of. And we talked about why we don't approve it. And at the end, I would say to them, you know, very often children are told, turn over a new leaf. You're no good like this. You've got to turn over a leaf. That's impossible. No one can do that. But if you show them a kaleidoscope and you look through it and you turn it slightly and you say, look, there's a different pattern. That's all you need to do. It's a question of looking at what we are doing and saying, if I just changed that slightly, for example, taking the register in a classroom, I imagine that goes on in schools in India as it does here. I went to a school once where the teacher sang the register. She would sing each child's name, and each child had the choice of either saying, I'm here, or singing, I'm here. The children loved it. It's little changes like that. You still do the register. That's a rigid thing you've got to do. It's inflexible. It's the law. You've got to take the register. But just a little turn. Can we do it differently? There are a lot of different ways you can do that. And I think, you know, when you're operating in a system that's rigid, you as the teacher have to follow that framework. You're not in a position to be able to bend the framework. But in terms of turning that kaleidoscope slightly, could I do this slightly differently? I think it's keeping an open mind. I mean, we teachers are so busy. Every day you've got all those lessons to get through, all that work to do with the children. Sometimes there isn't time. You think, oh, I did this work last time, I'll do it again. But if we can just maintain that, got to do this differently, art even once a day, then maybe we can begin to make the changes.
Okay, fine. My next question, Carolyn, is you mentioned strict but kind. Can you give us an example of this?
Well, yes, I think I can. I once brought in a trainer for my staff at St Mary's Cairn on classroom management. The teachers were insulted. They sat there with their arms folded rather rudely because they thought they knew all about it. This trainer was magical, absolutely magical. And she sent us away with that, saying what you have to have is a questioning approach. So we had some fairly rigid rules about what you couldn't do in the grounds in St Mary's, because it was a school with partly built on an old quarry. So there were some quite steep edges. And one day I found some Year 7 children actually having a wonderful time, but they were rolling down this very steep hill, which I knew was extremely dangerous, and the rules are quite clear, you're not allowed to do it. So I happened to be walking past and they saw me, and of course they stopped down at the bottom. I said, well, just come along the path and come on back up. I just want to have a chat to you. Very important, give them a moment or two to think about it. If you catch them too soon, they're cross with themselves, not with you, but their crossness comes out. And all I said was, do you know why we have that rule? And they said, because we might hurt ourselves. And I said, yes, exactly. So why did you do it? And I wasn't cross, but they never did it again, because you go in not in a threatening way, but they know, children know when they've done wrong on the whole. Sometimes you do have to be very, very firm, very firm. But if you reserve that for very, very, very rare occasions, it will have an impact. Mostly, and I think this rigid framework is often largely to do with behavior, isn't it? But I learned at my son's school that if he strayed beyond the straight and wide, he would be in trouble, but it was never held against him. He was one that's in very, very deep trouble during the day for smoking, of course, as boys are, but he was playing in a very big concert at the school that evening. He was a musician, and he wasn't prevented from doing that. He was celebrated for doing that because they dealt with the other thing. It was gone. Once it's over, deal with it and move on and nudge them back. I said that once to a girl. I said, you're a marvelous girl, but I can't go on with you at this school if you carry on letting the staff down in this way, because I can't ask them to take responsibility for you. And she gave me a very insolent look. And I said, oh, you think I value you too much, do you? And I said, I do value you. You're marvelous. You're a wonderful musician. You're a great girl. But if you don't go along with what this school values, I can't keep you here. And I promise you I'll do it. I will hate doing it, but I will. She never strayed again. So it can be done, but it takes time. And time is so often what teachers don't have. I think heads have to make time for those things.
So I think, Amarja, you've got your answer too for your question. So I'll take this one from Georgina. Bringing back children to normal education after 2 years would be very challenging. How do we simplify this so that children are comfortable and education doesn't lose its identity?
Oh, I wish I could give you a simple answer to that question. In fact, it's a terrifying question. And I often think, thank goodness, I'm not in charge of a school now. But, you know, I think there is an answer. And I think it's the same answer as to all the other things. Don't imagine there's a magic wand and you can do something that will make it right the minute they get back. Look at each child. Maybe get them to talk about what's happened to them. Allow time for talk and listen maybe to what they're saying to each other. You know, as you go around the classroom, if they're talking, everything you can do to learn about what's happened to them and how they felt about it. Make them feel valued the minute they walk in, and I'm sure you'll feel like that. Oh, so wonderful to see you again. My, how you've grown. Don't you look pretty? Or you look very smart today. Something to make them instantly feel good. And then all you've got to do is, I think it's a bit like a 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. Just start picking out the pieces that seem to go together and build up that picture bit by bit. It will demand immensely of you, your kindness, your creativity, your patience. But if you believe in the children and you quickly establish that framework so they know where they are, don't be afraid to be strict about what they're allowed to do at school and what they're not allowed to do. More than ever, they need the framework. They need to know what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. So don't be afraid of that. Don't make it too soft for them. But within that, make it kind and encouraging. Celebrate all those little tiny bits of progress, and you will be exhausted at the end of every day. But I would hope that at the end of every day, you will see some new little rays of light. And you can't undo the harm that's been done, but you can begin to heal it by patience and kindness and determination. And also, don't make the children feel that they've been ruined forever by this. They have an opportunity now. It's happened. It's been the same for children all over the world. They're all in the same place. So let's do what we can now to make it as good as we possibly can from now on. I think that's all you can do. But it's a very, very hard task.
That was very well said, Carolyn, and especially the imagery of looking at it as a jigsaw puzzle, because a jigsaw puzzle does form the whole, and there is hope, and as long as you bring them back with that value in each of them, I'm sure it will work. So I'd like now Dr. Kumi Vivaina to say a few words.
Can you hear? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
All right, thank you. And now I'm visible, I guess.
Yes, to that.
Okay. Carolyn, I wish we could have all seen you, but technology does these things with us. It's a shame your camera did not work, but you were just so expressive. And what really struck me is that in this very short presentation, you were able to pack in so much, so many valuable takeaways. I loved the way you talked about balancing school subjects with learning character strengths and virtues, as Segelman and Peterson would say. It's so vital that we do it. Also, what I loved about your presentation was that you brought in certain anecdotes from your personal life to make it more interesting, to help us understand those concepts better. Also completely agree with you that once you've stimulated their appetite and made them enjoy learning, your job is done. And from then onwards, your assessment of them could merely focus on the things that they can do, making them feel good about themselves. So these were some amazing points that you brought out. And also mindfully managing the questions of students. I think this is extremely vital to us as educators. When children are asking these numerous questions, I mean, instead of giving answers quickly, perhaps we need to mull over them, be completely present and respond to them. So I think this was a fantastic first presentation of GTPS. And thank you so much, Carolyn. It was wonderful. And ladies and gentlemen, all those assembled here, we're still waiting for the Honorable Minister to come and inaugurate when she says that she will be able to come in. So let's hope she does, but we will carry on with the program regardless. So thank you, Donna, and thank you very, very much, Carolyn. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Thank you, Ms. Reed. It was a truly invigorating session. And I know I'm just repeating what Kumi ma'am has just said, but I think we all needed to hear that, and we needed to remind ourselves of the things that we may have forgotten as teachers. We now move on to our next session, and it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Ruchita Dhar Shah. Ms. Ruchita is the founder and CEO of First Moms Club, a thriving global online community for mothers. Ms. Ruchita, a very warm welcome to you, and may I request you to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nina. As usual, it's my honor. Good evening, everybody. It's my honor and pleasure to be here. I'm always, as you know, as an individual and as First Moms Club, there to support Kumi ma'am and GTPS. And today we have our next eminent speaker is Dr. Ranjani Krishnaswami. Dr. Ranjani, welcome. I hope you can, yes. Dr. Krishnaswami is a proud recipient of the National Award for Contribution to Education from the President of India. Currently, she's an educational consultant working on many projects. She's the Director for Education for Dosti Realty Group of Schools. She's been involved in the setting up of St. Gregorius High School in Chembur. She's been a principal for 25 years. And she was also involved in turning around Billabong High School in Thane. For the past 10 years, Dr. Krishnaswami is a visiting faculty teaching at the ECCE Ed program in the SIES Institute in Mumbai. She's also been part of the curriculum planning for ICSE in 2014. And she's associated with the Global Scholars, Inc. and part of the Bloomberg Philanthropy. Which is a distance-linked group program for students in the age group of 9 to 13. And today, she'll be sharing with us her views on the 21st century skills that leaders truly need. I have just one request for everybody in the audience. Please keep yourself on mute. We have some lovely speakers here making some amazing presentations, and we would not like them to be disturbed. So Dr. Ranjani, please.
Ruchita, will you be able to do my presentation for me? Ruchita, I've sent it to you.
Actually, you'll need to send it to Donna ma'am. She's the one who will.
I've sent it to Dr. Kumi.
Yes, so I'm sure she must have shared it with the technical team. Yes, they'll have it.
It is shared with the technical team. Yes. And if you like, Ranjani, Yasti will happily run it to you.
Yeah, Yasti, would you do that for me? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to make a point. Everybody can put in their questions in the chat box, and I will ask those questions on your behalf at the end of the presentation.
I would just like to say one word before you begin, Ranjani.
Yes, no problem.
Ranjani is a very, very special person, highly innovative, a risk taker. And I'm so delighted that she's accepted this invitation. And I'm equally delighted that Ruchita has agreed to share, because the whole concept of GTPS is that parents and teachers work together. So carry on and start your presentation, please, Ranjani. Thank you very much.
Yes. At the very outset, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, okay. At the very outset, I'd like to thank Dr. Kumi Vavaina for inviting me. The pleasure is more mine than hers. I'd like to thank everybody associated with GTPS 2022 for having me here. It's always been a great delight to speak to people, because at the end of the day, that's the only way you can connect with Generation Next. And if you wish to be relevant and learn something, as a leader, you need to be a learner first. And I'd like to believe that over these last 25 years of being a school leader, I've tried to be a learner as much as possible. The very first slide, please. It's just the title slide. Yeah, the first one, please. Not this, the one before this, please. The title slide. Yeah, thank you. Okay. You know what? Many, many years ago, when I was just wondering, I said, what exactly are 21st century skills? I asked myself that. is leadership so different today than what it used to be? Because I remember when I first became a school head way back in 1992, the challenges were there. Certain challenges have remained constant. What really has changed is perhaps what the pandemic has brought about. So I'm going to share with all of you a small joke. This is a pre-pandemic joke, okay? And even if you've heard me say this before, please be indulgent and clap your hands and laugh along with me, okay? So there were 3 people who died and who were in heaven. And remember, this is a joke not to be taken seriously. There were 3 people who were in heaven, and one was a doctor, an ophthalmologist. The other one was an automobile engineer, and the third was a teacher like Ranjani. So suddenly, St. Peter went up to God and said, you know, God, we made a big mistake. These 3 people have another 10 years. We got them in early. What do we do? So God said, okay, go and ask them if they'd like to go back. So St. Peter ran and he went up to the doctor and he said, Doctor, would you like to go back? So he said, of course, I was at the peak of my career, and therefore I'd like to do there's so much more that I want to do. So he went back. And he went there and he found there was laser technology and whole lot of machines which he didn't know. Head or tail off. After walking very quietly, he decided, okay, I'm going back. I'm better back there in heaven. And he came back and he said, no, I'm fine. Then when the automobile engineer, so he said, of course I want to go back. I was at that point, I was discovering something new. So he went back and he used all his CAD/CAM design, etc., and went in. And there he found that he was totally out of place. He didn't know what to do. So he said, okay, I think perhaps I'm better off in heaven. And then, of course, there was this teacher like Ranjani who went back. They said, Ranjani, would you like to go back? She said, yes, of course I want to go back. I love my kids. I love my school. And she went into the classroom and she said, okay, people, come on, open to page 44 and let's get started. And she went on and the class started. The reason I'm saying this is pre-pandemic. If I had to go into the class today, the scenario would be very, very different. So can I have the next slide, please? Yes. So technology is the differentiating factor. So when we say 21st century, a lot of things may be the same, but technology has become that one particular factor which has changed everything overnight. As Carolyn said earlier, whoever thought we'd be sitting so far away and yet in a position to communicate with over 350 people? So we'll come back to technology a little later, but having said that, technology is what has made so many things possible, and schools will never be the same again. So unless you're willing to go with the flow, go with the change, things are going to be different. So the first thing the new age leader or the 21st century leader needs is to be tech savvy. If she's not tech savvy, if he or she is not tech savvy, well, perhaps they need to be another place. But having said that, to me, the human element is perhaps more important than the technology factor. Technology enables, but the human element binds and brings people closer together. Can I have the next slide? So what the new age leader or the 21st century leader really needs are a number of C's. The first one of them being clarity of vision. There are a whole lot of other things. Yeah. The vision of the organization needs to be very clearly, boldly presented right at the very beginning to the team. This clarity of vision needs another C. That's the communication. Communicate this vision to the entire organization. and ensure that the team that we have has the commitment to that vision. And how do we do that? By collaborating. Of course, needless to say, the communication skills are very, very important. And above all these things, you need the confidence to ensure that your clarity of vision is communicated to the entire team, adding the commitment, the communication. In the earlier days, leadership skills were largely autocratic. It was my way or the highway. And then it went on to becoming, what shall we say, binding. But today it has become participative. There is no one single leader. You have a number of leaders for different situations. Situation leadership is perhaps what we need to develop in all our organizations. Everybody, since the target group that we are talking to, we have parents, teachers, and school leaders, and leaders in the making. Every one of us, the teacher perhaps is one of the biggest leaders because she's leading this entire team of her class. Young children who are looking up to her with so much of love, affection, confidence, believing that she has the magic wand that's going to get rid of all their problems. So therefore, every one of us should remember that we're all leaders in our own way and try to do things in a manner that will help us take our team together. Next slide, please. I told you that the C's were very, very important in the 21st century: coordination and collaboration. These again have assumed a lot of importance today. As a school head, I have been very, very fortunate that I've always had a great team. And if I've been able to do a lot of things, which sometimes I thought were impossible, it was because of the confidence that my team had. They said, no, ma'am, you can be sure we'll do it. It's not difficult. And we all collaborated together. Every one of us brought in our own little things and we put it together. And there, of course, we had a good school, an award-winning school. I'm fortunate. I'd also like this point to thank all my team members who are perhaps many of them watching and attending this workshop. Thank you for helping me reach where I've reached. It's only because of your support and belief that I could do it. We need today to be team players. I said earlier, autocratic, my way or the highway is no longer allowed. We need to take the team along with us. What does the new age leader really need to be? A teacher, a mentor, an agony aunt, a subject specialist, an administrator, counselor, an HR person. So at the end of the day, a leader today needs to be a multitasker. That is indeed a very, very tall order. And in the educational field, this is perhaps a little more tough because while we're all subject specialists, we know very little about administration. Because in schools, since that is my area of specialization, most often than not, the senior most teacher is made the principal in a school without even looking to find out whether he or she actually has those kind of skills to administer, to manage, and take the team along. And which is also perhaps one of the reasons that very good teachers are very poor heads. I'm sorry to say this, but we found the minute you make a very good teacher into a principal, the school suffers because A, they lose a good teacher, and 2, they've gained only a not very good administrator. So a teacher needs to understand that, yes, I'm also a leader in my own way. How am I going to take my team along with me? In that case, it would be her classroom. Yes? Mentor. A true leader is one who creates more leaders. And therefore, the role of mentoring starts right from the time you are a leader. I've been very fortunate, again, that I've had the opportunity to be mentored by some of the best people. Dr. Meru Bengali, who was the Vice Chancellor of the university, I'm very, very proud to say I'm her student. And though she never knew it, I learned so much from her. And I also worked in an organization that allowed us to be free, to discover ourselves. And I'd like to believe that when I became a school head, I gave that same sort of freedom and opportunities to all my team and my colleagues, teacher colleagues, to be able to do the same thing, which is perhaps one of the reasons there are so many school heads out there who've all been my former colleagues. Agony aunt, 9 out of 10 times. And I say this because there are a lot of women involved in the teaching faculty. I know one must not talk about women and men, etc. Here, there should be no gender inequality. But the fact of the matter is, even today, despite the 21st century being on us, women still have to bear the brunt of the work that is done in the house. True, we have a lot of enlightened men who share the load, but more than 75% of the housework is handled by the women, whether it is going for open days, whether it is ensuring that a hot meal is served and the lunchbox is packed, attending so many things, it's the women. And in the process, they wear themselves out thin. So very often, teachers tell me, this online thing is not for me because I'm stuck at home and people believe that I'm at home so I can do all these things. When are you opening school? When can I get back? Because that offered me an escape. And it also saddens me because school or an educational institution should not really be an escape, no? It should be there because you want to be there. And again, there are a lot of little issues that women face. And when there is a woman leader at the head, they like to come and cry on your shoulders. By all means cry, but don't make that a habit. Subject specialist. Yes, I'm happy to say that most leaders, especially in educational institutions, are leaders, and that happens to be their core competency. However, we need to understand that you can only be a true subject specialist if you allowed yourself to also be a learner at the same time. When learning stops, everything stops. So, which is one of the reasons when someone calls me to attend a workshop or perhaps speak at a workshop, even if the speakers are sometimes people who are much, much younger than me, both professionally and chronologically, I go there because I'd like to know what the next generation is thinking, how their mind works. Thank you, lovely young people, for always keeping me rooted and helping me be a learner all my life. Administrator, I mentioned this earlier. I know the day when I became a principal, we didn't have too many educational management courses or administrative courses or whatever. Today, I'm happy to note that there are a lot of such programs and teachers are getting themselves trained to be administrators. However, lot of organizations, the ICSE board, the CBSE board, the IGCSE board are also organizing leadership training programs for school heads so that they hone their leadership skills. And this is something that everybody needs to get into because there is always another side to the coin and there's always more to learn. Counselor. I'm sure every single person attending this session would agree with me when we say that a teacher is more of a counselor, a leader is more of a counselor, because half the time we need to understand the child, understand the parents, because when you're not just teaching the child, you're also handling the parent. And here I'd like to just say one thing. All school heads, please realize true parents are coming to us because they want their child to study in the best school in the city. But we're not doing them a favor. On the contrary, I'd like to believe that they are doing us a favor because they're allowing us to share parenting with them. So we're really speaking partners, which is one of the reasons I have always had my school office open 24/7. I've said, parents, children can walk in anytime. I'm always available. Even today, when I'm no longer a school principal, I'm a school director. My job is not so much of interacting on a day-to-day basis with the stakeholders, but I still keep my office open because I believe that an open office is indicative of an open approach. But I'm also a little disappointed that most school heads, if you're not doing this, I'm sorry, it doesn't apply to you. The school office is closed and you need to take an appointment, etc., etc. I'm not saying walk in just like that, but do be approachable, because only if you're approachable will people trust you and come to you with their little challenges. And yes, today with a whole lot of new corporate mentality coming inside into the field of education, we do have different departments. We have counselors, we have administrators, we have other subject heads, etc. But the HR department is a new creation because corporate sector has entered education. And very often the HR person appoints the staff without the school head even knowing too much about who's been appointed. Yes, to keep your job less, because the school head really has a lot of jobs to do. The HR can weed out the candidates, but the final selection, I believe, should and must depend on the school head. Most schools do that, but there is this new trend where HR does everything. The other day I had someone telling me, ma'am, HR called me and told me that because with this pandemic, lots of children are leaving private schools and joining government schools because of this financial crunch that everyone is facing. And she said, I've been in the school for the last 9 years and I've been asked to leave. And I said, look, I don't think I want, I'll give you a good, a reference letter. She said, I don't want a good reference letter. I need a job. I'm the only earning member in my family. So she said, can I go and speak to the school head? He said, no, this is the job of the HR. And I just felt a little pained because HR people really don't know too much about running of a school. So perhaps we also need the school head really is a true human resource manager. And what else does the school leader need to know? Manage the time, because you have just so many hours. And in that, earlier, the school's main job was knowledge dissemination, because you had families that took care of the other functions, keeping children off the roads, custodial care, instilling societal norms, etc. But today, with joint families no longer being the order of the day and nuclear families taking, with every societal change, we need to accept these changes too, nothing wrong with that. But now the onus has come onto the school, because the school needs to not only do knowledge dissemination, the child has to be a good elocutionist, the child has to be good in sports, a good singer, a good dancer, and then get 95%. at the end of it all. And how are you going to do that in the entire 6 hours duration that you have? And manage the space. School heads are always running short of space, especially in a city like Mumbai, where schools are growing up, not growing wide. Each one of us is fighting. There are just a couple of halls, and everybody wants that hall to do their practice, to do their singing, to do whatever. So we need to think creatively how to handle that particular crunch. Resources. This is the bane of all educational institutions. No money for anything. And the pandemic has brought this home in a way that nothing ever has. I don't need to tell you, I think every principal out there knows that fees have been very, very slow in coming. And of course, we need to manage people, your teachers, your students, the parent body, the board of governors, and of course, the authorities. Even if you're a private school, you still need to follow a lot of rules and regulations, that thing. I have been fairly fortunate that I've rarely had problems with my school parents. By and large, no, I think I've been very, very fortunate. And perhaps one of the reasons I attribute that to the fact that my office was always open. They were always able to come and talk to me. I never played the high-handed principal, never. Can I have the next slide, please? The school leader, more so than ever in today's century, needs to be very well networked. Must know a whole lot of people and know them well. How does this happen? You need to constantly interact. If there are functions, meetings, try and make it a point to attend as many of them as possible, because we learn from every one of them. And at the end of the day, our problems are quite similar, you know. We may think they're different, but you scratch the surface, our problems are really the same. They involve parents, they involve teachers, they involve children. So interact constantly with people, keep in touch, at least occasionally, thanks to digital technology, we can say, hi, good morning, how are you? I hope everything is going well with you. Maintain visibility, because it's important. If you wish to be relevant, you also need to be visible. And there's no point in sitting in that ivory tower and locking yourself up. You can be the head of the biggest school in the world, the biggest organization anywhere. But at the end of the day, if you're not in touch with the ground realities, you will never get to know anything. All this can be done when you collaborate with people and when you are creative. Can I have the next slide, please? I'm not going to talk about creativity now. I've kept a separate slide, especially for creativity, because creativity will involve so many other aspects. So I'm going on to this again is very typically a 21st century skill, global mindset. The very fact, you know, we always say, oh, the world has become a global village and stuff like that. We need today, it is a reality. We need to think beyond national borders and embrace a global culture and work ethic. Years ago, I think it was 1999, when computers were just, or was it 95? I'm not very sure. When computers were becoming the buzzword in education, I was fortunate enough to attend a training program in Israel on education and technology. And in the process of our interaction, we were talking about, and one of the papers that I presented was, why can't we do projects? All schools do projects in groups, 5 children in a group, class-wise, sometimes house-wise, so on. I said, why can't we? Because we were people from 35 different countries. I said, why can't we work? Internet had just come in. It was not easy. They said, why can't we work on a project overseas? And then let's put it up on send them little I was very, very happy to know that 20 years after that, it became a reality. And that's where the Global Scholars Incorporation, which is a thing of the Bloomberg philanthropy, it is a distance education project. Children all over the globe are given a topic and everybody works on it. And they put up their little findings on the website and they discuss very, very common issues. For example, a simple thing, this in a lighter vein, Bombay's Vada Pav is so famous. And then in the process, we found out that every country has their own Vada Pav, hamburgers, hot dogs, and so on and so forth. And in the process, they all laughed and they said, hey, look, give us your recipe, let's learn. And this was a new learning of sorts. So we need, and again, we realize that different communities, different sects, in different parts of the globe, they think differently. So when you attend and you are open to interacting with them, for example, there is this song, Uthe jab ke kadam, bolo ram pam pam, ta la 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 la. That was a film song. And my sister told me that she's in the US and she was working and she was just humming to herself. And she had a colleague, he said, hey, what was that? So she said, it's a film song. So he said, I hope you know, this is also the Nazi tune. And she didn't realize that he was a Jew, and we know about the Jews being persecuted all over the world during the Second World War. And she said, hey, I'm very, very sorry. So I just mentioned this because sometimes we do not know so many things. Unless we are more open to a global interaction, perhaps we may be left behind and we'll be stepping on so many people's toes. Another very important thing, which is going to take great steps in the future, is your multilingual diversity. We are talking in English, we're interacting with each other in English, but English, while it is spoken by many people in the world, we realize it is not the only language of communication. And soon we are going to realize that people are going to talk in different languages, and education is, if it's not already being done so, it is being done in several places, different languages. So it is important for us to understand certain basic things that, yes, multilingual diversity has come to stay, and perhaps it is important for us also as school leaders and educational leaders to understand that, yes, we need to know more about other cultures, other languages, other diverse, at least basic, simple interaction in the language. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to speak the Queen's English or whatever language that is being spoken, but little basic things. At least we need to say, comment allez-vous, bonjour, and things like that, depending on the country. So that is it. We need to understand. Can I go back to the earlier one, please? I haven't done with that. Yeah, we need to understand and respect different cultures and accept differences in working styles. I mentioned this because I was talking the other day to somebody who was working with WHO. And we found that she was on a conference like this with people from Afghanistan, Tonga, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. And she said to me, I'm on different time zones, and I'm on each time when I go there, I have to talk to them. Somebody sits, they interact with me, another thing. And in between they say, excuse me, I'm going to have my coffee. This is my time for coffee and stuff like that. So keeping all these things as leaders, if we wish to be futuristic leaders, we need to take cognizance of all these facts. For example, in America, lifestyle is very casual. But when you go to Japan, they take everything very seriously. In China, it's an ugly ball game. German, very, very formal. So let's understand a little bit about how the globe works Because if we are creating children for a world that is tomorrow, we don't know what that world is like. We have no idea what is the kind of job they're going to have, what is the kind of learning that is going to be relevant for them, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. I've been told constantly that the new age leader or the leader of the 21st century needs to be a critical thinking specialist. She needs, or he needs to be creative, have good communication skills, problem-solving skills, collaboration, information literacy, technological skills and digital literacy, be able to work in a team, throw out the rule book once in a way, get out of your comfort zone, talk about mindfulness, be a crisis management expert, and so on and so forth. So let's see what critical thinking is all about. Critical thinking, because as we said earlier, we're going to fit into a society that is highly fluid and dynamic. So you need to be able to analyze, understand the situation, analyze it, do some research, listen carefully, explain what you're going through, be flexible, just, fair, objective, and then evaluate. So critical thinking involves all these aspects. Can I go to the next slide, please?
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Dr. Ranjani.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just have about 9 more minutes to go.
Yes, I'm almost
yeah.
through. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Creativity. The ability to think out of a box is a must. This was a slide I simply loved. Every one of us is used to playing this dots or crosses. And this particular slide, I thought I must put it in. How many of us have ever played dots and crosses this way, canceling the X like this? So thinking out of a box is a must. And I can give you innumerable examples of how we can think out of a box. But again, I'm not going to talk too much about that because as I've just been told, I have 9 minutes. But I want to share with you just one experience as a teacher. Years ago, when I was a teacher, we had a very tiny building. I worked in a school that was very tiny. All that we had in front of us was the sea-face. And one period that all children hate is essay writing composition, because they have to write. And you say it has to be 200 words, 2 pages or 2.5 pages. And not everyone likes doing that. And then you're constantly correcting. And teachers have this habit with red ink, you circle the spelling mistakes, underline the grammatical errors, and so on and so forth. So they said, we don't want to do anything. It's such a lovely day. Let's sit here, not go out. So I said, okay, let's go out and write an essay. So the principal told me, she said, Ranjani, are you sure you can do this? It's hot, fairly warm, 9:30 in the morning. There are parents walking. So I said, no, don't worry, we'll do that. So we went out and we sat down there and I told the children, this was the sea-face. And I said, children, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and smell, hear all that you can. Okay, close your eyes and then put it down on paper. And after that, whatever you feel, put it down either in the form of prose or poetry. It's okay. You will not believe what we got at the end of that half-an-hour session was a flood of creativity. They came out and they said, oh, it was smelling. Somebody said it was salty. I could hear footsteps walking. Somebody is talking on the phone, and so on and so forth. But the creative output was something. So perhaps if I'd sat in the class and made them write an essay, they would have listened to me. But perhaps they wouldn't have been as creative as they were when we went out. So the ability to think out of a box is very, very important. And as school leaders, I think that is very, very I've been saying this very, very all the while, but yes, it is very, very important. Next slide, please. Again, as leaders, we have a team. Now, my guru of management, I learned management and administration from him, Father Joe Saldana, God rest his soul, he's not here, but he told me one thing. He said, Ranjani, if you want to be a good principal, you need to know these are the 4 stages in a relationship with your staff: bartering, bargaining, building, and bonding. And he said, most of us are at the bargaining stage. 25% of us perhaps are in the building stage. And very, very few people are in the bonding stage. If you can reach that, perhaps you've achieved what you set out to do. So I think this is important too. Bartering, bargaining, building, and bonding. Next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? Yeah. Again, people management, empathy, high level of emotional intelligence, negotiation, social intelligence, accepting criticism positively, walking with your ears to the ground. Next. Identify and tap talent, most important. Have a growth mindset and listen to everything, especially to what is not said. Allow for situation leadership. I mentioned this earlier. Everybody may not be good at everything, but everyone is good at something. And I believe as leaders, we need to allow for situation leadership. Create opportunities for leadership and mentorship. Nowhere is this more important than today, because young people are very impatient. They don't want to wait. People like me waited for 15 years to become a school head. Today, people want to become school heads in 5 years. Rightly or wrongly, the world is moving fast, and we need to allow for that. Next, please. What are the attributes that the school leader needs to have, especially today? Optimism, ability to solve complex problems, crisis management. The pandemic has taught us that, if not anything else. Have cognitive flexibility. Make decision, but think before you think. Somewhere I think I've said in my next slide, act, don't react. Service orientation. Remember, as educationists, our job, it's not a job. It's a service that we are providing to society. We're actually nation builders. Next, be ready to learn, unlearn, relearn, and upskill yourself, both for yourself as well as your team members. Next. People think, I'm summing up now, people think leadership is about being the boss, but no. In reality, it's about having integrity, being ethical. Very often, as school leaders and educational institution leaders, we have to walk a very thin line. Managements and board of governors don't always listen to what, because they have a different target. They're looking at the numbers. We're looking at something different. But it's a very narrow thing that one needs to work on. But it can be done. Self-awareness. Know your strength, know your weakness. Act rather than react. And lastly, most importantly, as an educational leader, you need to have a very, very high sense of personal and professional security. Because only if you have that, are you able to create more leaders and mentor others. Thank you. I think that's done.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Ranjani. I
hope I've done justice to the faith that Kumi and team have reposed in me.
Yes, of course.
Since you mentioned it, Ruchita, may I? I think it was an extremely interesting presentation for me. And I felt that a lot of teachers and a lot of people sitting here in the audience would envy the teachers who worked with you.
Thank you for saying that.
From what I know of you, you definitely reached that bonding stage with all of them. So thank you for the rich experience that you have brought into GTPS, and we will turn to you for guidance again and again. Thank you, Ranjani. Over to you, Ruchita. Ruchita, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think what I loved personally was to always be a learner. You know, right in the beginning when you said that to be a good leader, you have to be a learner. And I think that's something that it just made so much sense. And also when you said that technology makes all the difference, but it's still the human element that bonds. Yes. And I don't think all of us should forget that. Unfortunately, I might not be able to ask all the questions that were asked, but I would probably ask one or two. Ma'am, there's a question which says, is it really possible? I think this is about the multitasking slide that you had. So there's someone who's asked, is it really possible for one person to be all of this? Ideally, yes, but it's a tall order. So what would you like to say about that? It is
a tall order, but then if you're not ready to walk that mile, I don't believe we need to become school heads. I'm sorry if I sound a little uncompromising, and I believe when you take on that mantle of being a school head, especially in this very fluid and vibrant world, dynamic world that we're in,
hybrid,
I think you need to be all that and much more.
Okay, and I'm going to, sorry, I'm going to ask the last question, which says, given the current, there's Nirmala who's asking this, given the current education system, how do we build a generation of future leaders with critical thinking skills?
I believe we need to listen to every one of them. You know, very often, even children ask questions because they want to know. And our system as it is, we shut them up. Oh, don't interrupt me. Most teachers say that. Okay, I can't do. But I believe if we listen to them, or if their question, is something that's going to take time, can we tell them, look, can you meet me a little later? I'll help you solve this. But I believe make a note and make a genuine attempt to answer their questions. It will happen. And I've always said, much of the learning happens outside the classroom. And that is why a school leader needs to walk the talk. Always walk around. Today, what happens is we're sitting and watching on CCTV what's happening in the classroom. People of my generation didn't do that. I'm not running that down. It's important. We need it. It helps in so many ways. But I believe if you walk, it doesn't tell you how people feel. It tells you what they're doing. But when you walk around, their eyes light up, they see you. My students used to tell me, oh, when Ranjani ma'am walks, we hear her heels on the thing, everyone sits straight, So these are little things and you learn from them. And perhaps all these things help in building, creativity, critical thinking, and just generally being good human beings. Because I believe if you're a good human being, all those things fall into place.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And with that, I will hand over to Donna. Donna, over to you.
Nina will come on.
Sorry, Nina will. Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
Thank you, Ms. Ruchita. Thank you, Dr. Ranjani. I think the whole concept of good leadership with selfless vision and the impact that it has on all stakeholders is something that we all realized. And possibly the absence of good leadership is something that we are all grappling with. For our next session, I'd like to warmly welcome Ms. Anaita Subedar. She is the editor-in-chief of Parsi Times. She's also a media specialist with rich experience to her credit, spanning multiple media platforms, including education, public relations, journalism, and brand management. Welcome, Ms. Anaita, and I request you to take over the session.
Thank you so much, Nina. A very good evening to all of you wonderful people here, educators, parents, the supporters and well-wishers of the fabulous Global Tipping Point Summit. It is my absolute privilege and delight to be a small part of this grand summit, which I know for certain will soon grow into the much needed progressive movement that is the need of our education system today. Under Dr. Kumi Vevaina's inspiring leadership and untiring efforts, just like the earlier summit, the second GTPS summit also comprises some of the most inspiring and visionary speakers. And it is my honor to welcome and introduce our next speaker, Shrija. Shrija is the founder and currently the Chief Functionary of India Education Collective, or IEC, which is a national level organization working across 9 states, focusing on a systemic approach to enable government schools to function as high quality, community-owned institutions of learning. Prior to starting the IEC in 2015, Shrija was the CEO and secretary of the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation. She was also the founder secretary of Prajayatna and its chief functionary for almost a decade. During her engagement with child rights and education over the past 26 years, she's been instrumental in developing a core approach to structural change in education governance and in pioneering a capability-based learning initiative across the country. Shrija is also an Ashoka Fellow. I take great pleasure in inviting Shrija to take over.
Good evening. Very good evening to one and all. So, yes, so I'm going to start this session with something that I don't generally like to do, especially with something like learning. I don't think we should start with data. But what happens is, when we talk about learning, and when we as an organization have spoken about how children have learned across the different clusters that we have worked, cluster as in a group of 15 to 20 schools. That's an academic unit in the system. So whenever we've spoken about how children learn, the response has been that, okay, then can you present the data, which we do generally. But then, over a period of time, I also realized that, data gives a certain kind of perspective as to how one kind of connects what one has done to what one wants to communicate. So I'll just start with, can the slide start? Yes. So India Education Collective, as Naita just mentioned, we work across 9 states in almost 400 clusters. The focus of our work has been to see how children learn, rather than what they learn. So we feel that if teachers kind of focus on how children learn, a lot of the issues that we see now in terms of, this whole discussion about examinations being an issue, and, it's just about recall and things like that. If we give teachers a tool to understand how children learn, I think it is a very, very powerful way of actually helping the teacher to see and very closely the entire learning process. So next slide, please. So starting with this research study, this is one of the research studies included in the meta-analytics of Black and William, done in 1998. So it was more to understand the role of formative assessments in improving student learning. This study was done with 5-year-olds in kindergarten. It involved 838 children drawn mainly from disadvantaged home backgrounds in 6 different regions of US. The control group comprised of around 410 students, and the experimental group was about 428. The teachers in the experimental group, the teachers in the experimental group were trained to implement this new system of measurement and planning, where they basically assessing the children, where they understood the individual learning levels of children to plan their lessons. And the teachers the teachers in this group mainly used observation of skills to assess progress and work with open style activities, which enabled them to differentiate the tasks within each activity in order to match to the needs of the individual child. Now, the students after that in both the control and experimental group had to answer multiple choice questions at the end of the study, which were in the sense, there was an interaction and the students responded to it, which were different from the open style activities actually done in the experimental group. Even though the pre-test measures were a strong determinant of all our outcomes, the students in the experimental group achieved significantly higher scores in reading, mathematics, and science than control group. So it's very interesting to see that in the control group, 1 in 5 children were put in special education, as if they needed some kind of a, special focus on how and what they need to learn. Whereas in the experimental group, the corresponding figure was 1 in 71. So that kind of gives us a feel as to how, we need to look at how children learn, the very process of how children learn, rather than, what they learn and measuring their ability to recall. Next slide, please. So before we speak more on assessments, I just thought I would like to share about how we understand learning, because we feel that is the root of it all. When I started working with children and learning, one of the core beliefs was that learning is interconnected with life. That's how I perceived this whole learning process. And that learning is a natural process. And even before children come to school, they've already learned so much about the world around them and how to engage with it. In the school, this natural process of learning isn't respected, and that itself is the starting of the problem, I think. Children are coming to school with the knowledge and skills, and that needs to be strengthened and built upon through their education, rather than forcing them to memorize disconnected, pieces of information. Hello.
Srija, you're muted. You would need to unmute yourself, please. I think you muted yourself by mistake.
Hello, Shrija. If you can hear me, you're on mute. Shrija, could you please unmute yourself? We cannot hear you. Yasti, can you do that, please? Can you unmute her?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. There's some confusion here.
No problem. No problem. Please carry on.
Okay. Yeah. So, yes. So I was speaking about, children coming to schools with pre-knowledge about many things, And so what happens is that, sometimes we force upon them, these disconnected pieces of information. And these are things which they cannot make any meaning out of that, And even the initial phase of literacy and numeracy is largely focused upon and memorizing alphabets and numbers, which to a 5-year-old are actually speaking irrelevant in the scheme of world, even when done through, what we usually make small children do through song and dance, The child's ability to read, count, or is built on the fundamental abilities to recognize patterns, make interpretations, problem solve, communicate their needs and thoughts. And at the foundational stage, when these abilities of children are strengthened through, and these experiences that they have, the learning experience that they have, are very contextual. So at this foundational stage, when these experiences are strengthened, literacy and numeracy, I feel, emerges naturally. So children see the world in a holistic manner, and the learning experiences need to be designed keeping this in mind. Next slide, please. Yeah, going deeper into what we mean by the natural process of learning, I'll in the later slides, I'll also explain how we actually do this. But what you see here in terms of this entire process of what we call as the learning cycle is something that we practice across all the clusters that we currently work in, reaching out to more than 2 lakh children across these 9 states. And I also will explain what exactly that process is on a regular basis, because these are things that cannot be one-off, where you say that we took the children out for a project and we did that. In the last year, if you ask them in the last year how many times did such projects happen, mostly because we work in government schools, mostly the response is that we took them to the bank or we took them to the post office. I mean, these are very, very rare occasions when children are taken out of the school. So this whole learning cycle is a process. I just wanted to reiterate that this is a process that we kind of practice in the schools on a regular basis. So going a little bit more into this, into what we mean by the natural process of learning. We believe that learning is not a linear process, and that it happens, on an ongoing basis. It happens continuously. So the learning cycle you observe here is something that has emerged from the understanding and experiences of thousands of teachers that we worked over the years. And whenever we learn a new skill, we go through this cycle usually. So the process of feedback and self-reflection is an integral part of learning and need to happen in tandem with experience and practice. Therefore, we believe assessment is an inherent process of inherent part of learning, and classroom processes need to be designed keeping this integration at the center for learning to happen. Next slide, please. I hope many of us are familiar with this character called Calvin. This is a reflection of our current education system, where feedback and reflection happen only at the end, and therefore the learning cycle that I was sharing about, it usually gets jammed. So during COVID, we witnessed that most schools across the country did not have any data on student learning progress through the year, and rather were dependent on one single exam to decide the next steps in the student's learning journey. And it is not just when the assessments are conducted, but also what, how, and why of assessment that needs to be reflected upon. So what do our assessments currently test? As if you see in these strips, comic strips, how they describe assessments. Actually, assessments force students to memorize facts which they will forget in a short span of time anyway. And the purpose of assessments is more to understand how the child learns rather than measure their ability to recall. Next slide. And so if we look at the learning cycle as comprising of 4 different elements, key elements. One is in terms of the content. The other is in terms of content, or you can call it what happens in the classroom, the content of what the teacher transacts. So one is the content, so one is the pedagogy, one is teacher training, and if you look at assessments as the 4th part of it. we realized that, you change any one of the elements here, like say if you change content, and that is what most states where we work with, the tendency is to say that, this year we are going to change the content of classes 3 and 5. Next year we are going to change 2 and 4 to make it more, so to say, child friendly, or make the whole learning process more joyful. The large part of the exercise that the machinery does is in terms of, wanting to change content. Changing content actually does not change anything in the whole learning system, because, finally, what the teacher tests the child on is the child's ability to recall the content. So it is not necessarily about changing the way learning happens. If you take, for example, teacher training, and you get the teachers to have some kind of a very intensive, 10-day workshop where they reflect on how children learn, or in terms of who am I as a teacher. Finally, after this euphoric 10-day training, the teacher goes back to the schools, into the same structure where she has to teach children to the textbook, and actually assess what the child has memorized at the end of the chapter. So what happens is, if this whole cycle, this whole the connection, the interrelationships between pedagogy, the curriculum, the assessments, if we don't understand the how this gear works, we actually do not make much changes in the way the learning system is, because we are looking at each of it as discrete components. But if we look at assessments as a component which is more like a lever, just like how we understand systems thinking, to identify which is the lever of change which can actually bring about a change in the entire system. If you look at assessments, and if you understand that, assessment is more about understanding how children learn, and providing feedback to the child as the child is learning, it actually opens a whole a range of abilities that the child actually needs to develop. So it's because our assessments focus on measuring the current assessment. In fact, it focuses on measuring skills of memorization and recall. And what gets assessed, that gets addressed in the classroom. So that's why, not to blame the teachers, not to blame individual teachers, so to say, not to blame any intervention. But the point is, if we don't change the way we look at assessments, or change the way we look at teachers understand learning, we actually don't change anything in the entire system. So when we talk of teacher training also, if the teacher goes back to the same system where she has to measure a child's ability to recall, she will I mean, if she is rewarded for measuring the child's ability to recall, then she will focus and reinforce and perpetuate the same behavior. So it's like the structure creates behavior. The current structure of education actually perpetuates that kind of learning process. So since the assessments focus on content information, and that is what teachers focus on delivering and innovate to deliver it in a more engaging manner, but that is not solving the crisis in learning. So till our assessments actually focus on both skills and content, and this needs to start from the foundational years itself, learning in classrooms is I think not going to change. Yes, next slide. This is a picture of one of our working areas in Bihar, where the teacher, and this process is not like a one-off exercise. It is something that the teacher does on a regular, on an ongoing basis. This might be a visit to the fields to see the different kinds of plant and to understand different parts of the plant. But another day, it might be a small project that the teacher, it's not even a project, small activity that the teacher would ask the children to do, say, if it's about water, say to understand the different sources of water that is there in 2 lanes of the village, and she gives a task to a certain group. To another group, she asks them to write down the different sources of water. To a third group, she may ask them to do some work with clay, to make the different models of the sources of water. So to different groups, she could give different tasks. And at the end of that, all the children come back together and make their presentations. So what happens is, it is not like the teacher, that the activity is separate from how the teacher understands how children learn. So this is a very integrated process as to how it happens. So we have witnessed this in different parts of the country. It cannot be, we feel that assessments cannot be changed at the systemic level through a mere policy change. When we work with teachers, we see that they need, the teachers need opportunities to reflect on their practices. And that's one of the processes we do through teachers collectives, which is an ongoing process, a process that is done on a monthly basis with teachers of a particular cluster. We see that, teachers, when they're provided these opportunities to reflect on their practices of learning, assessment, they themselves identify the changes they would like to bring in their classrooms. And since assessments and learning, they both are interconnected, teachers need to be supported and enabled, to facilitate learning processes which are more holistic and natural. So the agency, their agency in improving their impact in classrooms is what can shift assessments in the long run. This is another picture of our work in Uttarakhand, and this is a picture of a teachers collective where the teacher, when they come for the collective, they actually bring the work of the children. They have to bring samples of the work that has happened in the classroom, and they discuss about what a child has done, or even they share, they speak about it, or they can show in the from the paper or the document that is there in the child's portfolio. And when they bring that, they discuss in the collectives. They also ask the other teachers as to how do you assess this child. So there are 4 levels of learning that we kind of practice in these clusters, which is like evolving, interested, involved, and self-directed. The teacher asks the other teachers that I put this child in an interested level. So for each of these aspects, which is reading, writing, speaking, there are these 4 levels. So she shares that, I put this child in the interested level. What do you think should be the level of the child in terms of this particular parameter? So this is a typical a picture of a typical discussion that happens in a teachers group. And in this, what happens is essentially we facilitate peer-led, it's a peer-led teacher professional learning community, so to say. They come together every month, the teachers come together every month, plan, they review, they share their impact that has happened in the classroom. This is one of the most powerful spaces, I feel, where it is a very, very democratic and a non-judgmental space where teachers, because it's a peer-led process, they reflect and share their problems and identify solutions collectively. And there is no like a resource person, so to say, who understands and knows, this all knowledgeable resource person who comes in to tell them what they need to go and do in the classroom. So this is a very different kind of process, and in this they work together, they plan for learning outcomes every month, and they also start realizing that there is a need for the kind of data that they discuss to make their plans more effective. And yeah, so yeah, okay, the next slide. So what happens is, in terms of, we try to understand what what actually should be assessed, and in the next slide, following slide, we will share about, I'll come to this later. Please go, yeah. So this question, if you are able to address this question, I think this is the key to solving the crisis in learning. For example, the PISA tests that we know about, these tests not just the content information gained by students, but rather their abilities to apply it in their real life context, because they believe that it is what will translate education into real change. Knowing what we also understand from this is knowing algorithms is not enough until students develop the ability to learn how to make algorithms and use them for problem solving. Yeah. So what is to be assessed is something which is very, very important. In terms of what are the parameters that we set in terms of assessing children. And here I'm definitely focusing on this aspect of formative assessment. So when this, I'm sure most of you would have heard about CCE, Continuous Comprehensive Evaluation. I think the intention was quite good, but the way it translated, starting from all the CBSE schools to the government schools, it was more about conducting more number of unit tests and taking the best test that was done to assess how the child learned. And I think that it was the whole thing got translated in a very skewed manner as to what we mean by formative assessment. It just did not look at the fact that learning is an ongoing process, and we as people who have been working in education, we need to have many more effective tools to understand how to gather that information about how children are learning in the classroom on an ongoing basis. Yes, the next slide. These are some of the ways in which we look at how children need to be assessed. One is that it has to be at an individual level, and it has to be against her or his own learning outcomes, the pace at which the child learns. And the other is in terms of it being non-cumulative, like one single number. I must share this, that in one of the states where we work, we had these aspects on the progress card that we use in the processes. We had all the aspects, the different aspects of learning on one side, and we had the different levels. So for example, if it is reading, then there was, it had what you describe as what is it when a child is at an evolving level, what is it when it is interested, involved, or self-directed. Similarly, for speaking and for writing and for number recognition, a whole lot of things. So for example, if a child who is, say, at an involved level of reading can be at an interested level of writing, that is definitely possible, and that's how it would be. So when we spoke to the particular functionary, department functionary who was responsible for the cluster, the kind of response was very typical of how I suppose he was also struggling to understand this, to understand how to get it implemented in his cluster. So he said, this actually looks very interesting. It actually gives us a picture of where the child is, but do you have a mechanism of actually putting everything into one single digit or a grade? That would help us, So the whole understanding is like, for whether it is reading, writing, or any aspect of math, finally, if you're able to arrive at one particular digit, that is going to give us a good picture about the child's learning process. So, and in terms of integration, the way we look at how it should be assessed, the entire learning aspect, the experience of the child needs to be looked at very, very holistically. It cannot be seen in compartments and especially we have in our working areas, we stress about the fact that, there isn't anything called curricular or extracurricular or co-curricular activities. For us, we feel everything is curricular. So there is a very, you can call it an unfair or uncalled for separation between what is currently called as curricular and extracurricular. So we need to see how when we assess the different ways in which children learn, how this can be looked at in a more integrated manner. And the most important of all is that it has to be on an ongoing basis. It cannot be at the end of a learning cycle, which is, for which the current education system is best suited. Because, what you test is can you recall what you learned in the past 3 months or 6 months, and can you write that? So for memorization, this kind of examination pattern is best suited, but that doesn't actually give any insight about how children learn or about, where to take them into the next level from where they are now. Next slide. Huh? Yeah. So we also need to see whether assessments allow for these. For us, these aspects are very, very critical. I'm sure it is so for all of us. This is about creativity, about collaboration, about critical thinking. And I also find it very interesting when terms like 21st century skills are used, because I feel these skills have a time immemorial value across all the centuries, because humankind has been able to progress because they have kind of applied all these skills over the centuries. So so I feel that we need to see whether to make assessments more meaningful, whether these elements are addressed and taken care of. We feel that when assessments are part of everyday classroom, then they become learning opportunities for children to share, to apply, and express their learning. Actually, there should be moments where children confidently demonstrate what they have learned, and it will definitely it is drawn from what is relevant for them, which is what will make them most comfortable to express and for that matter to apply to any process that they do in the classroom. Yes, next slide. So some of the assessment practices that we follow in the classrooms are what we call as ongoing portfolios. Ongoing portfolios are, to put it very simply, these are box files where whatever the child does. And I just want to quickly remind you that this happens in the government schools that we work, and which is a good thing. And so whatever the child does on a regular basis gets into the portfolio. It can be the concept map that the child would have drawn, or any work that the child has done during the individual practice time. So a typical day is divided into a whole group session, then a learner group, and an individual practice time session. So the whole group is where the entire class comes together, learns together, and discusses things. The learner group is when they are assigned, and these both the whole group and the learner group are sessions which are mixed ability groups, and the learner groups, they learn to work with each other, collaborate. They go do small tasks, come back, make presentations. The remaining class, when a small group is making a presentation, the others are listening to it, and then they provide their feedback. They sometimes argue. So what happens is the whole classroom design is structured in a manner that enables this in a very seamless way. So it is not like doing a whole group is a task. or doing a learner group is a task. That's how the learning design is structured. So in the third session of the day, which is the individual practice time, whatever the child does on an ongoing basis goes into the portfolio. The teacher observation diary, this is something, these have certain elements which enable the teacher to make her own notes. And it's not that the teacher makes the notes for all the children every day. She can identify 1 or 2 children whom she would like to focus on. And based on that, she makes her notes. And what comes into the observation diary of the teacher and what is there in the portfolio comprises what is called as the child's progress card or the child's profile. And it has certain aspects. It is divided into procedural skills, process skills, attitudes and areas of interest. Procedural skills more like, which are linear skills, so to say, not in terms of learning. While learning, they need not be linear, but the way they are assessed is more linear. So, for example, if a child, can recognize the letter, comes in the evolving, then words, letters, and words, sentences, and paragraphs. So, though it goes in a linear manner, the assessment process, the way the children learn, say, for example, the way the child learns the letter need not be in that linear manner. The child can be introduced to a particular letter through a story, or the child can be introduced to a particular word through a concept discussion that they're having in the class. So we call them as procedural skills. The other part of it is the process skills, which are more like ability to comprehend or to identify a resource or to ask a question. These are process skills. And then there is a section on attitudes and the areas of interest. Both attitudes and areas of interest are not for assessing, but these are areas which enable the teacher to understand how the child needs to be supported to move from one level to the other. So this is the last slide. I'm sure most of you are very, very familiar with this picture. I just want to conclude by saying that each child is unique and has immense potential to learn and grow. And as a society, just like I would like to reiterate what our earlier speakers had mentioned. As a society, I think we need to rethink on our expectations from education and schooling, because that is what gets manifested in the system, and the current dominant paradigm is more about, how much marks did the child get. And very, very sadly and unfortunately, these marks gets celebrated in the mainstream media and, amongst parents across, and different circles. So, and across state and different state of the society. So we really need to rethink about what we want to celebrate in terms of children's learning. And if we believe that the purpose of school is to nurture learners, then we need to reconfigure actually and rethink about our assessment processes to focus on that purpose. So with that, I would like to conclude the session. Thank you to the entire team and especially for inviting me to speak in this session. And I hope I was able to share our experiences that I was fortunate to be part of over the years. And so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rija. That was wonderful. The integrated approach that you've taken to teaching, and Shrija has done phenomenal work in rural areas. Most of us don't really feel that the system can be changed. She's worked with government schools and she's achieved so much. Shrija, we're going to get back to you for advice every now and then. And don't tell me you're busy. Please spare some time for us. Okay,
sure,
so
Anita,
over to you. Don't think we have time for questions, unfortunately, but over to you.
Thank you, Kumi. Shrija, that was really, really brilliant. It was really, really an insightful presentation about an extremely core aspect of education, and that is assessments. You have very, very effectively thrown light on some extremely crucial areas related to assessments and the entire process itself. I particularly found your take on points like, the learning to learn, or how assessments need to focus more on skills and content, which is something which is so important, but is usually missed out in the current assessment systems of education today. Also, towards the latter part of your presentation, you spoke about meaningful assessments and how creativity, collaboration, and critical thinking should also be very important parts of assessment, which I think makes so much sense. And I would have a lot more to say, but we are really, really a little caught for time, which is why I'm going to thank you on behalf of
I just wanted to add one thing that, we really need to identify, and I think as a country, we have enough and more intelligence to identify tools that is able to assess these kind. I mean, we are stuck with the whole examination system, and for years we are doing this. I think it's time now that we come up with more innovative and very simple and interesting tools. Something like that we shared was something that we do. But I think there is room for more newer ways and newer mechanisms of assessment. I think we should do that. And if as a small organization, if you are able to do that across some 300 clusters across the country, I think all of us together can do it across the country fully.
Yes, that would be great. It would be good for everyone concerned, for our new generations as well. Thank you so much, Shrija, for that fabulous presentation. I'd like to hand over back to Nina.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shrija. Thank you, Ms. Anaita. And if I may just add to whatever Ms. Anaita and Dr. Kumi have already said, I think the greatest takeaway for me today was when you mentioned about how we need to rethink what is it that we must celebrate about our children's achievements. That was really something that I, as a mother, I think I need to think about that a lot. Thank you once again very warmly to both of you, Ms. Shrija, Ms. Anaita. We now move on to our next session, which is a panel discussion. And before we begin this discussion, I have a request to make to our audience participants. Since we are restrained by constraints of time, I request you to reserve all your questions for the open mic discussion, which we will have on Sunday, 27th February at 6:15 p.m. I repeat, Sunday 6:15 is where we would gladly take all your questions at the open mic session. Our next session is to be chaired by Dr. Atul Nischal. A very warm welcome to our chairperson. He is the Director, ICSL, Editor-in-Chief, the Progressive Teacher Magazine, Executive Vice President of the S. Chand Group. Dr. Nischal, a very warm welcome to you. May I invite you to chair the session and to kindly introduce your team too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. I want to thank Kumi and Donna and the entire team of GTPS 2022 for having us, have a discussion on such a nice platform. I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job holding 300 people for, so much time on Zoom is definitely commendable, and you're going to be doing it for the next 3-4 days, I think. So that's brilliant. Our session, let me quickly invite all the panelists first. We have with us Mrs. Sangeeta Krishan. She is joining us. I'm not going to spend too much time on the introductions of each of these illustrious people because it's just going to take half an hour to do that if I divide it between 3 or 4 people. So I welcome you to look at the profiles on LinkedIn. So Sangeeta is joining us from Dubai, where she is currently conducting school inspections for KHDA. and she has worked extensively in rural schools as well as some of the leading schools of the country. I also have with me Shubhra Irani and Nagma Sheikh. Nagma, can you turn on the video, please? Is that possible, Nagma? If you could turn on the video. Okay, there you go. These are the profiles of people. So I think that's the best way to do. Thank you very much, Kumi, for helping us do that. Now, let me quickly roll out, because we have a very interesting panel discussion without any presentations for you. I'll quickly set up the tone so that we can begin immediately. I remember visiting Finland about 4 years back, I think. And that is when I learned that in the Finnish education system, there is no assessment. As you know, that they have been leading and they have been topping and they have been rated as the world's best education system consistently, but you'll be surprised to know that there is no assessment. We as a country, as a lot of people have spoken about, have been over obsessed. I don't want to use the word obsessed. I want to use the word over obsessed by assessment. Everything revolves around assessment. Okay. I mean, everything is an understatement. Everything and more is assessment driven. And there is a country which does not promote assessment at all. So when I visited them 3 years back, I had this question for them. That doesn't it hamper the higher educational pursuits of students if you don't have any assessment? And the reply that I got from one of the professors from University of Helsinki, who was taking our session, was that earlier not too many Finnish students used to go abroad for higher studies. So they had a very good system in-house where they could apply to universities. And since education, by the way, if you have never been there, the entire education in Finland is free. So if you're doing a PhD, up from kindergarten to PhD, the entire education is taken care of by the Finnish government. You don't pay anything to get educated. And therefore, they never felt the need for assessment. It was just not there. But they had thought of doing some assessment in graduating classes around 3 years back. I'm not sure if that has been implemented or not. Let me bring the focus to foundational years, which is going to be the crux of where we are going to be talking about. Now, according to the National Education Policy, the foundational years are defined as starting from kindergarten or even before that, 0 to grade 2. Okay. So if those of you are not aware of that, so from birth to grade 2 is the policy saying is going to be foundational years. So what exactly is the focus of education or learning during that time? I think that there's a wonderful book called The Passionate Mind, which is written by Michael Schulman. And this book is about building or developing an intelligent and creative child. So when you're looking at foundational years, and in fact, I have a copy of this book, and I strongly recommend that all of you, pick up this book. This is an old book. If you're working in the early years, well, the facts of this, the content of the book are relevant for higher classes also. But our job is to create intelligent and creative minds. That is the job in the foundational years. Well, how do you define intelligence? Intelligence, if you look at if you talk to any psychologist, whenever they try to measure intelligence, they give you a test of solving problems. They focus on problem solving. So intelligence has a correlationship with the ability to solve problems. If you look at the national education policy also, the focus from rote memorization is now shifting to ability to solve problems. We want problem solvers in this country. We want to develop problem solving skills. 21st century skills are a subset of the larger problem solving skills. So certain problem solving skills have been categorized as 21st century skills. Maybe we need to look at a bigger picture of the problem solving skills. Now, the wonderful part is that you might think that problem solving starts when a child is grown up in middle school. That is when problems start coming in, but that is not true. Even an infant, even a 1-year-old is solving problems. Now that might be very surprising to a lot of us. What kind of problems would a 1-year-old be trying to solve? So let me quickly share with you what this book says about the kind of problems that every human being, including you, me, a 1-year-old, and a Nobel laureate, has to deal with all the time. And these problems are categorized into 4 different components. The first human problem that everybody has to encounter is classified as what's out there. So the mind tries to figure out what's out there. That is the big classification. When a child is born, he is observing, he or she is observing. He or she is trying to get sense of the house, get sense of the mother, get sense of the father. He's trying to figure out when is a good time to, how to ask for milk. Do I cry? Do I wave my hand? What's out there is one of the problems that every child is dealing with. The second problem that humans deal with is what leads to what. So these are abstract. I'm a mathematician, so I like to look at things in a very abstract manner and then specialize them. The second aspect is what leads to what. Okay, what do I do? And then what happens after I do that? That's the second aspect. You're trying to make sense of it. The third is what makes things happen. And the fourth kind of problem is what's controllable. So these are 4 categories of problems which every Nobel laureate to a kindergarten student is dealing with. Only the scale and the level of what a scientist would be doing to what a kid would be doing are different. Okay. So how do we create these intelligent children and these creative children? And we are going to be focusing on that. Assessment, formal assessment is I think it's a strictly no-no at that age, because we are setting up we are setting up the seed for comparison. So just to give you an idea, if a kindergarten teacher gives 1 star to one kid and 3 stars to another kid, then the child who gets 1 star comes back home and tells the parent that I hate this teacher and I hate my classmate because she gave me 1 star and she gave my friend 3 stars. Okay, because the child can compare that 1 star is not as good as 3 stars. The moment but this is a very informal way of doing it, right? We have done it just to motivate kids, but we set up some sort of comparison there. The focus of teachers during the foundational years is to figure out how to support learners' development, because every child is learning at a different pace. Every child is unique. So the focus is how can we support learners' development. Now, to do that, there are three important elements. First, a teacher has to observe the development of the child, identify where are the gaps. Second is that this data has to be recorded, whether Srija talked about teacher observation diary. In some way, the data has to be collected on every child if we want to give personalized learning. And the third is that we have to support the individual growth of the child. So I don't want to use the word feedback, because feedback says that I have given you feedback, now it's your responsibility. My job is over because I've given you the feedback. Well, that is not the job of a teacher. The job of the teacher is to support, not just give feedback. So we're going to be talking to my panelists today on some of these aspects. And very quickly, let me bring in Shubhra. Shubhra, are you there? Yeah, I can see you right there.
Yes,
good.
I'm right here.
Excellent. I was not being able to find my other two wonderful panelists. I don't know why they have not turned on their videos for some reason. And if you don't turn on your videos, I'm going to turn off my video also. So please do.
Until they have their videos on, we can see both Sangeeta and Dr. Sonal.
And Dr. Sonal, yes.
And Nagma will not have her video on. So you have your own panel, no worries.
Ah, I see. So Nagma is going to be behind the scenes. Wonderful. So let me quickly first try to understand from Shubhra. Shubhra, when we talk about observing students, okay, now we have to observe different domains. We have to observe their social growth, their emotional growth. That's very important, right? And because we need to look at the how these kids are growing. Just take us through this slightly as to how important it is for teachers to observe the social and emotional growth of kids and how they should do it. Shubhra, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Atul. Good evening, everyone. I'd just like to throw some light on social emotional learning in early years. So firstly, relationships with parents, other family members, caregivers, and teachers provide the key context for setting up the social emotional development in any child as the basis to any kind of learning. If the child is not emotionally settled, if the child is not aligned with speaking to others, with interacting to others, with others, and looking at the environment closely, any kind of learning domains or milestones are difficult for any child to achieve. So as a facilitator, as a parent, there are certain things that you can observe, to ensure that the social emotional development is happening in the early years. I'd just like to share a few points about this scene. So if you see a child, shows the ability to separate from the family. So it's a settling period. When the child's first formative years set in and the child steps into school, is there separation anxiety? Yes, there is always. However, how the child deals with it, how the facilitator provides the essential support, what does a parent do at the home front, to guide the child and to support the child that, yes, this is a smooth transition. This is going to be a transition for you, and how you are going to settle there, what kind of an environment is going to be there wherein you are safe and secure. So the connect that the teachers and the facilitators build in school is very, very crucial to this. Ensure that, to see that the child is able to express himself or herself in the best of his capacities, and children are natural communicators. You don't have to actually teach them to communicate. As a facilitator, all you need to do is be very, very observant of the child and how he or she is socializing with everybody, whether he or she is taking care of the environment and the materials. Is the child able to, share something with his or her peer, or even able to, for example, share the toys. So again, sharing of toys is something which, is crucial. And, we always tell children, yeah, please go ahead and share your toys. However, as facilitators and as early childhood educators, we all know how possessive the children are about specific materials and what catches their eye at this stage. So it is important to allow for independent as well as group learning. They need some time to settle in every day, and please allow them to do so, whether it is at home or at school. The impact of the teacher's behavior is very, very important in these early years, where the child learns through imitation, through role modeling. Even before the child learns to speak, your non-verbal cues play a crucial role in developing the child's social emotional connect, and your expression, your warmth, to invite the child in your class or any learning space is important to set that in. What can you do, to have a class wherein social emotional learning can be incorporated or inbuilt into your curriculum or your planning? So you could have a class which which has a supportive atmosphere. The environment is created in that area. Share certain life experiences. So sharing personal experiences is something which is also important through role plays, through storytelling. Get children to talk to you every morning through a quality circle time, wherein you talk about emotions, you talk about important values, the concept of sharing, the concept of greeting. You will find, as early childhood educators, children responding beautifully, sharing their home, kind of experiences out in class. They are very innocent at this stage, and they will be very open with sharing. So how do you lead and facilitate that discussion and, help them lay a strong foundation there? Again, as teachers, observing the child, listening to the child, always lending a listening ear patiently. That is something that they look forward to.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the big agendas for every teacher should be to answer two questions. And is the child happy? The first question is every day all my kids happy, right? And are they enjoying solving problems? Are they having fun? I think if that is the yardstick that we take, and Shubhra has just very nicely pointed out some of the ways in which we can work towards that area. One of the other areas that I think teachers need to observe very carefully is the physical development and the psychomotor development. Now, these two things are different slightly. A child might be physically well developed, but may not have the psychomotor abilities. They might not be developing. Or a child would have excellent psychomotor abilities, but still would be lacking somewhere in physical development. And as teachers, I think we are the best people to observe that. So I'm going to bring in Nagma. Nagma, if you could slightly, elaborate or share with us maybe the difference according to you in these two abilities, physical development and psychomotor development, and how do you observe these things in a kid? Okay, Nagma wants to be unmuted. Can somebody do that, please? Okay, are you unmuted, Nagma?
Yes. Thank you for the question. And this is a very crucial aspect of development that we will be discussing now. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Thank you for unmuting me. So, we all know that physical development refers to the growth milestones, and we are well aware of all these at every age and stage. And these would include the fine and gross motor skills, whole body movement and coordination, and changes observed through growth. The psychomotor development is defined as the change in a child's cognitive, emotional, motor, and social capacities from the beginning of life throughout the fetal and neonatal periods, infancy, childhood, and adolescence. In fact, these skills may be acquired throughout our lifetime. Even you and I will be developing these skills. As of now, I'm sure all of us have developed skills to deal with our learners online. So if the physical milestones are not achieved, then the psychomotor competencies will be affected. That is something we as teachers, as educators, need to be very, very aware of and sensitive to. So how do we observe these skills? So, through indoor and outdoor games, by setting up a play corner where children are given free time to play, exercises, something as simple as walking or running or sitting or holding the pencil or crayons and all such movements, something as simple as just turning your neck or opening your mouth or even smiling. I think we teachers need to be very discerning and observant, and I'm sure we all are. We also can have, set up obstacle courses to see how well they have developed their skills as far as movement is concerned. How do they respond to music and other audio visual stimuli? Sometimes, there are some learners who love playing and doing and making things. So Play-Doh and Lego and slime and wood blocks and other shapes can be used, cutouts and so on.
Right.
Puzzles and other resources. Thank you. Also, the manner, something as simple as the manner in which the child holds even the pencil or crayon while writing, scribbling, drawing, doodling. All these give us enough, I think, should we say, stimuli for us as teachers to observe. As Mr. Atul has rightly mentioned, and I concur with him, that we are not looking at assessments, we are not looking at judgment, and we are not looking at feedback. We are looking at growth. And we are enabling our children's physical growth, and we are enabling the development of their psychomotor competencies, psychomotor, competencies through observing all this. So the questions that we ask are, is the child able to arrange, construct, and assemble the stimuli provided for the specific task or task? Does the child move in the expected manner for his or her age? Does the child respond to the various stimuli as per the milestones? And finally, do remember that sometimes external physical factors may interfere, and we have to be sensitive about those as well, and we should be considering those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I think you made very, very good points. You know what happens sometimes in our system when we ask children to go and play, we also go and relax because now the kids are playing and we also need to relax. We don't, but I think it's very important, as Nagma pointed out, that when the kids are playing and engaging in some play activity with each other, that is not a teacher's free time. That is a time when the teacher has to take up a diary and observe how kids are moving around, how things are happening. Are they jumping properly? Are they not jumping properly? We don't have to really build that into a multiple choice question format, but I think you have to observe what those kids are doing and how they're playing. Let me come to Sangeeta. Sangeeta, I think, when we are observing the cognitive skills, development of cognition in a child, that is, we do at a very surface level. But how do you think that can be done by teachers at that level? What are some of the areas that need to be observed critically, and how can teachers do that, Sangeeta? Just focus on the cognitive development of the child.
Thank you, Atul. I've been listening to Shubhra and Nagma. What I found most interesting was, and which I personally also believe, that assessing young children cannot be purely academic in an academic manner. So when you're asking me to focus on the cognitive domain, actually, in young children, we cannot do it in these kind of silos. So everything is actually interwoven at that age. These young children are not a little older. Yes, you can make it a silo, but NEP also says they do not have silos in education. They're talking of integration in education. And therefore, when I talk of cognitive development, I think while teachers are looking at the holistic development of the child, cognition, the cognitive skills, especially what NEP talks of, literacy, numeracy, and I would like to add in here environmental awareness also. How is the child aware and sensitive to the environment around? Because the child is constantly learning from the environment. Literacy skills actually first come from the environment and then from the school. So it is just not possible for me, Atul, purely to kind of compartmentalize it, but I will try to connect cognitive development to other domains of development. And,
Go ahead.
Yeah. So when we talk of any kind of assessment, it is not assessment, let's put it, facilitation for learning, actually,
We need to be supportive and we need to have a system of quantification. And why quantification? Because we need to know where the child is progressing. It is not possible, if we say, oh, we are not going to assess and we are not going to quantify, then we are not actually taking the child, we are not traveling with the child on a journey. Some children may be faster in a certain thing and some may be a little slower, but as long as they are moving, as long as they're progressing in that journey. So actually in these early years, what are we trying to observe? We are trying to observe their progress from point 1 to point 2. We are actually trying to observe how they progress from their starting points to the end of a certain period. So if I'm a kindergarten teacher, for me, it is more about seeing where the child came to me in April when we begin our session, and where is he now in the month of, say, July or September, and looking at those particular skills and maybe other skills which may not be quantified in my rubrics so as to what I may say. So therefore, as Nagma said, while they are playing outside, it's not about playing and it's not just about the physical and psychomotor development. I think here it is more also about their language development. There is also, so whatever language we teach in a lesson, are they able to use that level of vocabulary? Are they able to communicate their ideas with each other? Are they able to express? So that also becomes an observation part, while they're out in the playground. Also, at the same time, also when you talk of numeracy skills, very often, in the early childhood, the focus is not so much on, though in India, we lay a lot of focus on counting 1, 2, 3, 4, aata hai ki nahi, kind of. It is more about the pre-number skills. If we can, build on the child's pre-number skills. In fact, I would like to lay an example here, as I was observing a lesson just the other day and the teacher was doing empty, full, empty, full. So she showed them a glass which had, say, half of the glass was full of marbles. And she said, this glass is full. And she showed another empty glass and she said, it is empty. Now, for me, and obviously for the child, the fact was, if there is something inside the glass, it is full. So, the teacher's own understanding of the concept of empty and full needs to be more mathematically correct.
Right.
That kind of a thing, because it is a pre-number skill. It is also a pre-observation skill.
Correct.
It is also a scientific skill which is going to build up, from the environment, So this kind of sensitivity of the teacher is very, very important. And, in early childhood, I again appeal to all the teachers who are involved with early learners, the young learners, not to create silos. We keep saying this is an English period and this is a math period. Okay, we may focus on a particular skill, but remember, all skills of early childhood are weaved together, are woven together, and we need to understand this fabric of early learners.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. I think you're absolutely right. It's one unified learning progress, and we look at the whole thing.
And then we can break it up, we can break it up for our observation purpose, but not from the learner's perspective.
Yeah, it's the whole thing, but in that whole thing,
there are these pieces.
Focuses, okay? You need to, so you can't be fragmented, but it has to be unified and it has different components that you need to look at. Very quickly, because we have very little time, we just have 15 more minutes left, I think, maybe 12. Shubhra, sorry, Sonal, let me bring Sonal in first. Sonal, are you there? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you and see you. So Sonal, very quickly, right? How does it teach? Why is it important to record student progress? Because Sangeeta just said that, it's about monitoring a child moving from point A to point B. And I, believe very strongly that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So there is some way that you need to record this data, some data, okay? Why is it important? And how do you think it can be done? If you can explain that in 2 to 3 minutes, that'll be wonderful.
Sure. So I'll take the first part, which is why is it important to record this? And in my understanding, I've developed something called the EPR, which I use to motivate myself to record student data. And E stands for evidence. So when we talk about the development in terms of, like Shubhra has explained, Dagma has explained, and Sangeeta has explained, that we need to look at motor skills, we need to look at cognitive skills, we need to look at socio-emotional. So there's so much information. And if a teacher does not record this information, it is very difficult to be objective. And it is very difficult to track how the child is progressing. So evidence-based progress, so E stands for evidence, P stands for patterns. So when we look at a child and when we record information, over a period of time, a teacher is able to notice certain patterns, which otherwise one fails to pick up. You may fail to, because you have a class of 35 or 40 kids. And how much can a human brain really store and remember, right? So when you look at your diary, a teacher's diary, for example, or if you look at a student portfolio, at the end of 6 months, you can see a certain pattern maybe recurring in the student, which could point to a certain ability, which could point to a certain disability as well. And the third point, which is R, stands for reflection. I feel that assessment or testing is as important for the teacher as it is for the student, because the teacher gets to reflect and modify or suit their pedagogy based on what they observe in the assessment. So if I observe that my child learns better with visual aids, so then I would probably use that to help that child fill the gaps for that particular case, right? So EPR stands for evidence, pattern, and reflection of the teacher. And I just remember this one particular incident. So I've been teaching in low-income based schools in conflict areas and also government schools. So kids who come here are slightly less privileged in terms of the kind of backgrounds they come from or the parent help that is at home, right? So a lot of these kids have learning gaps. So they may be 3 or 4 years behind grade level. So one of my kids was really weak doing it English and math and all of these sort of skills, numeracy, literacy, etc. But what I noticed is during lunch breaks, he would go and work with these painters who would come in the school to paint on the walls, right? They paint letters and different kinds of things. So he would go there, and week after week, I saw him doing that. And I kept making these notes in my own notebook about different kids who I was struggling with because I didn't know how to help them. And I realized that this kid learned through art. And then I started using art to motivate him to sit and learn letters and numbers. So that really worked out well for me. So that is something that, that's the why. And when it comes to how, I think a lot of people have already spoken about it, especially Shrija spoke a lot about teachers' observation diaries, student portfolios. Yes. I think what is important here as an instructor to understand is who is this recording data for? And I feel it's not only for the teacher to understand or the parent to observe, it is as much for the student to understand their own progress. So in my mind, there has to be 2 kinds of assessments or 2 kinds of data recording. One for the teacher, which can be a teacher's observation diary, or it can be a simple assessment, which the child takes and the teacher then corrects and evaluates. The other also has to be something like a tracker, a self-tracker, where the student can track how they are growing or where their gaps are. Or maybe this week I've gotten 3 stars, so maybe I've done better than last week. I got only 2 stars. So the purpose is dual. It's as much for the teacher as for the student. And there's one more point which I would like to mention is the consistency. So it's very important that we do it repeatedly week after week and not do it like end of the term or just somewhere in the middle term. I think we miss out on a lot of information in those ongoing days and weeks. So that's pretty much my piece.
I think you made I love the EPR model. I think, and what you're suggesting, that the learners also need to, monitor their own and track their own data. I think it will be a very big help to the education community if students in the foundational years can be taught or to create their own portfolio. I mean, there could be, every student in first grade, second grade, if he can manage his lunch box, maybe he can have a portfolio also, and he understands the importance of having my learning portfolio that I carry from one year to another year. I think these are brilliant ideas. But I think one big aspect is, then I'm going to come to support. So here is, we have observed students and we have observed them. We have recorded the data through evidence, through patterns, and identified those patterns. Now the time is to support these kids. Okay, and what do we do there? That's a big question. And one of the people who play a very important part when you are trying to support kids are parents, because you need to work together with them, and nobody's a bigger expert than parents on how to raise their kid, right? So here is a parent who says, I know how to raise my kid. Here is a teacher who says, look, this is the support I'm going to give you. Now these two guys, there's a conflict between the parent and the teacher or the school. So that's also one of the aspects that we need to quickly bring out. So first, let me just, ask each one of you, how do you provide support in your area? So Shubhra, I want you to go first. Suppose you want to support students' social, emotional development. What's the best way to do that? One or two things that you can share.
Right. So firstly, an open communication policy set from the school's end is important for the teachers to be able to facilitate with the parents on a daily basis. Maintaining records in terms of portfolios or anecdotes, for example, for social emotional learning is something that the teacher needs to do on a daily basis. Being very, very aware of how the child is on a particular day is something unsettling. Is the child, or else is the child elated and happy about something, so that you can reinforce that particular thing to upscale, the social emotional component is what the teacher needs to look at critically. Just to give you a small example of, sometimes you find that the child.
I'm going to interrupt.
Yes, please.
Okay, so what I'm looking at is, let's assume that I've observed the child is not happy. Okay. What do I do?
Right. So firstly, as a teacher, you should know what are the interests of the child and how you can, grasp his attention towards doing a task or just a normal discussion. Then gradually bring about the topic as to why the child is not happy. You won't be able to ask such a direct question to the child, but it is through, non-verbal cues, through your connect with the child, that you'll be able to support him or her. At times, just to give you a very, very random example, and it is relevant in school scenarios wherein a child is not happy to enter the class, just doesn't want to enter the class on a particular day. All right, and the teacher is welcoming. First of all, settles the child inside, allows the child to move to his or her favorite corner, or just even kind of fidget with things if required. Absolutely don't stop the child at that point of time. So I came across a child, wherein I realized gradually that after talking to the parent, that the father had stepped out of town for work, and child wasn't happy about that at all, and that is why he wasn't willing to enter the class. So to find that out, the parent-school partnership is of utmost importance, and a basic communication channel where the feedback given to the parent is going on a daily basis if required. A record maintained by the teacher, in case maybe how the child would respond in situations where a new person entered the class or a new environment. Did the child accept it, or did the child reject it, and accordingly take the progress further. So I think every child is unique in the class, and the teacher needs to employ different strategies for the same.
Great. I think that's wonderful. Nagma, let me bring you in very quickly. As few words as you can you share with us, what can teachers do to support the physical development of, because teachers are not, and that could happen a lot in rural schools where kids are not appropriately physically developed. And we're not going to feed them, cashew nuts and almonds and, a good sandwich. So what is it that teachers can do to help, help kids develop physically? Nagma, over to you. Or even psychomotor abilities. Are you there, Nagma?
Nagma needs to be unmuted.
Oh, okay. Who does that?
Yes, hello. Okay,
Hi,
so yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, so first and foremost, we must bear in mind that some developmental delays can be identified and addressed through early intervention, as we have been discussing. Parents could be advised here not to miss on observing the learning milestones, and in case that has happened, then the school has to be informed, kept in the loop, especially the teachers. Like, for instance, I have an example of a lady who told me that she had a C-section because her child was, very sensitive about not being touched and hugged by anybody. So she had informed the school, and the teachers and people in school were very careful about this. So whenever you had a play or a game or anything where a lot of, touching was required, tactile, situation, the child was given some special consideration. So like this, if teachers can find out from parents, if parents are, happy to, discuss, I think it can make a huge difference. Like, for example, there was a child who
Nagma,
had
Nagma, let me ask you a question. There is a child in my class. There is a child in my class
Huh.
who is overweight. Okay.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Now, what I do is I call the parents up, say, hey, look, I need to talk to you. This child is slightly overweight. He needs to lose some weight for his age. Okay. But the parent is a Punjabi like me, and he says, no, this is a very healthy child. It's not overweight. He's a very healthy child. Now, what do we do? What does the school do? What does the teacher do?
So, sir, first and foremost, I don't think we could call up and mention the overweight. We could talk to the parent, as you rightly mentioned. And I'm aware that, as far as weight is concerned, there are different parameters and perspectives. So I suppose what the school and many schools do is we do have, nutritionists and doctors coming in at times, to observe. Like in my own school, it was an SSC school, but every month we had people coming in to observe our weight and our height. So the BMI was, being informed to us. So I think with a little bit of that information, if parents could be spoken to, I think would make a difference.
Excellent. And that brings me to the last question, which I'm going to pose to Sangeeta. Sangeeta, how important is the alignment of parents and teachers, or the parent and school, in supporting a learner's development? Very quickly.
This alignment, like we are partners, the parents and the school, we are actually partners in the child's development. We are not standing on the opposite banks, watching the child learn how to swim or to cross this river. It's not like that. So if we keep this partnership in mind, it's important that the learning environment that the school provides, of course, the learning experiences that the school provides will be focused to certain developmental milestones and things like that. But at the same time, the philosophy, the ethos of the school needs to be understood by the parents. And that ethos needs to be supportive. So if the parent, like I know in Punjab rural schools, parent कहता है इसको अंग्रेजी पढ़नी आनी चाहिए, इसको अंग्रेजी बोलनी आनी चाहिए. And the thing, the teachers are just focusing on speaking English and writing pages. They write on the blackboard and the child copies alphabet by alphabet. That's not learning actually happening. So, getting the parents to understand how young learners learn, how we are going to do it in the school, give them the assurance that, by the end of this time, this is what generally the children will know, plus minus something, So that trust that school needs to build in the parents.
Right. I think that's
very important.
That's very critical. Parent communication is very important, because there are two kinds of extreme parents in India. There are parents who send their kids to school and don't give a damn. They don't even want to go there. They say, whatever you want to do with my kid, do it. I'm going to pay you the fees. I don't want to even know what happens in school. There are those uninvolved parents. And then there's another educated parents, who want to know each and every minute what you did, why you did, how you did, etc., etc. So we have a huge spectrum, and the solution to deal with that spectrum is a strong parent-teacher connect. I think that is very important. With that, we would
one more point, Atul, may I add here?
I was going to stop early because you have to catch a flight, but go ahead.
Just one important thing that comes to my mind is that the respect for the teacher. Because whatever teacher does, if the child goes back home and the parent says, "Oh, teri teacher to bevkoof hai, usko kuch nahi aata," that kind of thing actually undoes the learning that's happening. So this old Indian tradition of respecting the guru needs to come back into the schools.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. I thank all of you. I want to thank Dr. Sonal Sethia, Nagma Sheikh, Shubhra, Sangeeta for spending time with me here. It was wonderful, wonderful discussion that we guys had. Hopefully it makes a difference in the future. And I want to thank Kumi and Donna for giving this opportunity to us. Handing over to one of you two.
Thank you so much, Atul and team. That was brilliant. I don't need to say it. The chat box is on fire. And those of you who've attended all the sessions would realize that it's been a feast. It's been an intellectual feast. And I think the audience and all of us need 24 hours to digest that before the session tomorrow. So thank you very much. Please remain associated with us. Together we can make a difference. I just want to add one thing. We've received a message from the Honorable Minister of School Education, Maharashtra, Mrs. Gaikwad, that she has been held up today and she's not been able to come for the inauguration because it's Shivaji Jayanti. But apart from that, I think it's just been a wonderful evening for all of us. Thank you very much. Take care of yourselves. Nina, over to you, please, for the announcements.
Thank you, ma'am, for this immensely stimulating and invigorating panel discussion, which is the first of many panel discussions that GTPS 2022 promises to offer. It is my pleasure to thank Dr. Atul Nischal for skillfully steering this discussion and for their valuable contribution, for their rich and valuable contribution to this discussion. May I thank Ms. Sangeeta Krishnan, Ms. Nagma Sheikh, Ms. Shubhra Irani, and Dr. Sonal Sethia. Thank you so very much. To each and every one of our esteemed speakers and chairpersons and our wonderful audience participants, a very warm and sincere thank you for being with us today. GTPS is also happy to announce that the proceeds of a summary of today's proceeds will be posted on Monday, which is the 21st of February, on Teacher Talk app. I'd like to spell that out. That's TCHRTALK app. On this particular app, the summary of today's proceeds will be available. We continue to our sessions of wonderful intellectual feast, if I may quote Dr. Kumi, tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the evening. Tomorrow is the 20th of February, and we bring you a host of speakers and experts who will guide us through the vital areas of education through nature, education through sports, digital pedagogy, and gamification. Please do follow us on social media and tag us too. Thank you once again, and a wonderful day, afternoon, evening, or whatever it is to everyone across the globe. Thank you so much.